In the nine-province mainland, the land under the sky split into three. In the nine-province mainland, the land under the sky split into three. The most expansive piece of land of the northern mainland was this mainland's most liberal country, known as Northern Li. Northern Li's imperial sons and daughters possessed the same inheritance right. The country was rich and powerful, yet usually didn't attack the southern borders. For hundreds of thousands of years, smoke signals have never been raised in the country's territory before. The southern part of the mainland was split into two. The west, woven in mountainous regions with rough mannerism, was Western Kuan. The east, filled with flat farmlands and indoctrinated in Confucianism, was Eastern Ling. The two countries have been locked in warfare for many years, ultimately still with no victor emerging. And in the intersecting borders of these three countries lies the mysterious Immortals Valley, home to the man with the most exquisite medical skills in all of the nine-province mainland. Sun Qi. He is honored by the people of the three countries as the god of medicine. It's said that there isn't an illness in the world he can't cure, and people that he can't poison to death. According to rumors, there were quite a few disciples under Sun Qi. Those studying his life-saving medical techniques were respectfully titled as medicine fairies, and those studying his killing poison techniques were thus called poison fairies. Eastern Ling, year 23 of Tian Qi. A party of Eastern Ling soldiers hastily traveled on quick horse, rushing towards Immortals Valley. The horse's hooves kicked up a layer of yellow sand outside the valley, scaring the commoners on the road, who scattered away in all directions, for fear that Eastern Ling and Western Kuan were bringing the battle here. When the dust cleared, only a half-a-person tall little girl remained, standing under a tree, rubbing her eyes that were closed shut due to the sand blown by the wind. She wore a silvery red brocade jacket on her body, and on her tender white neck hung a pearl necklace. The pearls, jade stones, and gems on her head were dazzling and lustrous. This was obviously a wealthy family's young miss. Mother, mother, the little girl put down her hand, exposing an exquisite little face like carved jade, and a pair of unbearably delicate dimples. She looked in all four directions, her childlike voice yelling, "Mother." But the mother that lead her out of the Immortals Valley couldn't be found anywhere. Hired mothers were just unreliable. It has only been a while since coming out of the valley, and she already abandoned her and fled. She had no choice but to walk towards the direction of the valley entrance, thinking that after returning to the valley, let master hire another mother for her. This time, need to hire a more reliable one. Her body was small, and she had short legs. Before she could even reach the valley entrance, she saw that party of Eastern Ling soldiers already heading back in the opposite direction. Different from the vigorousness from when they came, at the moment, they all had their heads lowered dejectedly and completely dispirited. "We came using Great General's name, yet can't even enter the valley entrance. Isn't this god of medicine just too arrogant?" "Exactly, but Great General has been injured with a poisonous arrow. If the treatment is delayed any further, then it'll be too late." "Then got any ideas?" "We've already tried asking nicely, even tried forcing our way in, but none of that was of any use. All say this god of medicine had a strange temper. Not even 1,000 gold could buy his willingness. Whether to save someone, whether to kill someone, all were at the mercy of his will. Today, they'd specifically came to seek a cure, yet they weren't even able to see what this god of medicine looked like. It was inevitable to be disappointed. A little girl passing by their side, swaying a thin willow branch in her hand, suddenly laughed softly. This mocking laugh was extremely soft, but those soldiers on the horseback all had a background in martial arts. Their hearing skills were out of the ordinary. They distinctly and clearly heard this movement. "That little child. What are you laughing at?" The one in the lead looked like a commanding officer, with a red face and large ears, his appearance very much rough. He was already upset, having been refused at the door by the people of the Immortals Valley, and now getting sneered at by a little miss made him even more angry. He loudly roared, startling the little girl. The little girl turned her head over, and her jade-like appearance shocked the soldiers. How could there be a child this beautiful in such a rural place, and her outfit was also this uncommon? "I'm laughing at you all," charging around violently right outside the Immortals Valley, frightening all the villagers. "With you all being this rude, the medicine god naturally won't even bother showing his face. How can you blame him for this? If you want to blame, you can only blame yourselves for being too aggressive. The little girl crisply replied, yet inside, she thought, if not for these people, the mother that master hired for her wouldn't have been scared away either. All their fault, causing her to have gone this far for nothing. That commanding officer listened to the little girl's words. She seemed rather knowledgeable about this god of medicine Sun Chi. He somewhat relaxed his tone and said, "Little miss, we weren't deliberately being rude. It's just a person's life is involved. Tell us, what do we need to do to be able to let the medicine god save our great general?" The little girl, hearing his sincerity, thus lowered her guard and seriously answered his question. "Master hates rude people the most. However, you all have a reason for the cause. I will explain to him in your place. Perhaps he will forgive you all." "What? You're the medicine god's disciple?" That commanding officer's two eyes widened to the size of a copper bell, overjoyed at the unexpected good news. The little girl tilted her head with a smile. A pair of black and round eyes squinted into crescent moons. "That's right. Your luck is very good. I just happened to be returning to the valley. Can bring you all in?" Before her voice dropped, she was scooped up by the commanding officer by the waist and placed on the horse. "There's no time. Little medicine fairy, the heavens have good virtue. Trouble you to come along with us." That commanding officer raised the horsewhip and firmly whipped behind him. The horse rapidly shot forward. The party used an even faster speed than when they'd came, heading towards the borders of Eastern Ling, only leaving behind a gust of yellow dust behind them. "Old Jean, you finally came back. How was it? Where's the medicine god?" In the military camp at the borders of Eastern Ling, as soon as the incoming dust clouds in the distance were seen, an officer eagerly went up to welcome. The commanding officer called Old Jean aside in regret. "Don't mention that old bird, god of medicine. Didn't even meet us once." The incoming person let out a despairing expression. "My master isn't a bird. He's a person." The little girl that was placed horizontally on the horse waved her lotus-like hands and feet up and down, expressing her protest. The person that came over looked towards the horse in surprise, only seeing an extremely delicate little girl currently lying flat on top Old Jin's horse. Old Jean slapped his forehead and quickly had the little girl carried down. Placing her on the ground, she only reached a person's waist. "This is the Immortals Valley's little medicine fairy. We bumped into her outside the valley. We were unable to meet the god of medicine, but perhaps she can also save Great General." Old Jean explained to the person, then stooped down to speak to the little girl. "Little medicine fairy, my formal name is Huashan Jean, and is a commanding officer under our great general. This is Old Yin Huasher." Saying this, he pointed towards the commanding officer that came over to welcome them. The little girl smilingly looked to them, seemingly having something she wanted to say, but in the end she still didn't say it, only crisply saying, "You can just call me Yu Fu." Hearing she was someone from the Immortals Valley, Yin Huasher didn't dare to slight her, leaning over and cupping his fist to pay his respects towards the little girl. "Then we'll just entrust our great general to Miss Yu Fu. Please come in." Yu Fu followed them in, only seeing little white tents all around, encircling an imposing large tent in the middle. Outside that large tent hung a gold color flag, one with a majestically written Goob character on it, very much possessing the grandeur of a general. "Looks like this great general they spoke of has the surname Gu," Master said, "the most famous great general of Eastern Ling, because of bravery and excellency in battle, with feats no one could compare to, was bestowed the title Great General Marquis. Is that this great General Gu under the tent?" "Precisely, our great general." Yin Huasher personally parted the drapery. Yu Fu went in the tent, only seeing numerous densely packed high-ranking military officers standing inside. Seeing her walk in, they all lowered their heads, exposing a curious expression. "Didn't you say you were going to invite the god of medicine? How come you invited a little girl? This girl isn't even as tall as the table leg. Is she even 10 yet?" "Don't say nonsense." Old Jean, who'd brought Yu Fu back, scolded with a stiff expression. He'd finally brought back a little medicine fairy with great difficulty. If they were to anger her, and she doesn't treat the great general, then what will they do? Just what is this girl's background? Someone lowered their voice and asked Yin Huasher who'd gone out to greet them. Old Jean said she's a disciple under the god of medicine. The medicine god was unwilling to meet them. They bumped into this little medicine fairy outside the valley and just brought her back. While they were talking, Yu Fu had already walked to the bedside, faintly seeing a swollen figure inside the veil. She reached out her white and tender little hand, lifting open the bed curtains, and saw a deathly pale face. An approximately 40-some-year-old middle-aged man with an extraordinary appearance. His eyes tightly shut, yet his dignified bearing could still be seen. Between that pair of dense sword-like brows was a small scar, splitting the left eyebrows into two. Looking down, his bare upper body was filled with all kinds of cuts, and in his right arm, stabbed an arrow that was snapped in half. The wound was bluish-black, turning purple, currently seeping black blood. Aya! Yu Fu couldn't help covering her eyes and lowering her head. The few officers that were talking, upon hearing the sound, searched all over for her figure, finally finding her by the great general's bedside. Little medicine fairy, what are you shouting for? Yu Fu put down her little hands. Her plump, pink lips unhappily pouted. He's poisoned, and it's Kunlun snow. The officers that were still somewhat doubtful towards her earlier immediately had a whole new level of respect towards her. The medical officer in the camp had examined for a long time, both feeding the poisoned blood to rats and sniffing left and right, before finally learning what this poison was. Moreover, they only knew the name, and didn't have the slightest clue on how to detoxify. And Yu Fu had only taken a glance, and already knew this poison was Kunlun snow. Precisely. The medical officer also said this. Little medicine fairy, you really are too impressive. You actually knew what this poison was. You must have a way to save the great general. Yu Fu suddenly walked to table and chair on the other side, and strenuously climbed up the tall chair. Old Jean was still blankly staring at her, not knowing what she meant by this. Yin Huasher had already ordered someone to bring tea. Thinking that Yu Fu was still a little girl, he also ordered someone to send some desserts over too. Yu Fu looked to the snow-white sugar cake on the plate, and sure enough, her eyes lightened up. A pair of large eyes blinked. She glanced to Yin Huasher, like she was seeking his approval. The latter quickly said, Little medicine fairy has come covered in dust this whole way, and must be hungry. Eating something first, and then treating our great general is also the same. The more anxious he was inside about great General Gu's injury, the more he couldn't slight the Yu Fu before him, because she was the only person before them that could possibly cure the Kunlun snow poison. This Kunlun snow is the Western Kuan's secret poison. Under the 1,000-year-old extreme snow atop the Kunlun mountain, there's a kind of 10,000-year-old snow essence that can produce this type of poison. Yu Fu said while biting into the white sugar cake, with quite a few pieces of cake crumbs sticking onto her little face. Since Little Medicine Fairy knows the origins of this poison, asking to please quickly treat our great general. Read latest chapters at Wuxia World. Yu Fu's little hand paused, suddenly placing the half-eaten white sugar cake and hand back on the plate. She lowered her head and lifted her eyes. A pair of large eyes glistened. But I'm a little poison fairy, not a little medicine fairy. Huh. What? Poison fairy? Instantly, in the large tent, everyone fell into disarray. Old Jean widened his eyes, completely not expecting that this kind of thing would happen. A perfectly fine little medicine fairy that was brought back. How come turned into a poison fairy? The great general was already infected with a deadly poison. What use was there for a poison fairy at this time? Little miss, why didn't you say so earlier? Old Jean crouched down and looked to Yu Fu with his eyes wide open, like he was about to swallow her whole. Yu Fu pulled back and hid behind Yin Huasher. She shyly said, But you didn't ask me either. Hi. T/in. The sound of sighing. Old Jean anxiously slapped his thigh, making a sound like meat hitting the chopping board, a heavy and rough sound. It's all my fault, all my fault. Old Jean roared in tears. I've been crude and reckless my whole life. It's thanks to great general who didn't disdain me and accepted me under his flag. Yet, today, because I didn't ask clearly, caused great general's death. Outside the Immortals Valley, if he'd just asked Yu Fu whether she was a medicine fairy or a poison fairy, then there wouldn't be this unexpected mishap. Now, it was too late to regret. Seeing him howling in tears like this, the crowd of grown men in the tent all couldn't help reddening their eyes. Great General Gu has already been poisoned for a while now. Even if they go back to the Immortals Valley again to invite the medicine god now, it would still be too late. Everyone lowered their heads with reddened eyes. All were iron-willed men of the battlefield. Yet at this moment, because Great General Gu was poisoned and could not be saved, each and everyone crumbled in despair like stray dogs. Yu Fu was about to say something when she suddenly heard Yin Han Shi, who was in front of her, speak. "Brothers." Everyone faintly lifted their eyes and uniformly looked to him. The great general has been a hero all his life. Don't let him still see us like this before leaving. He won't be at peace in death either. Everyone get yourself together. Properly give General a send-off. These words were correct. Everyone deeply took in a few breaths, swallowed back the tears in their eyes, and all uniformly walked to Great General Gu's bedside. "Ai, wait a moment." Yu Fu attempted to pull Yin Hua Shi's sleeve, but everyone was sunken in sorrow, simply having no time to attend to her. And her tiny figure amongst the tall crowd was also unnoticeable. Yu Fu jumped with all her might, but it was still to no avail. She dejectedly pursed her lips, watching everyone be like walking corpses, their eyes full of melancholy as they looked to the great general on the bed. This aroused her curiosity again. Just what kind of general was he, to be able to let his subordinates be this fiercely loyal towards him, and be this sorrowful for his death? Seems like he's an incredible person, only lying there with eyes closed, yet could let one feel reverence towards him. She tilted her head and thought for a bit. Afterwards, seemingly coming to an important decision, she squeezed herself towards the center of the crowd. After squeezing through for quite a while, all the way until that bit of baby fat on her face were squeezed into a lump, did someone finally notice her. "Little medicine. Little miss, don't mess around. In a while, after we send off the great general, we'll naturally send you back." Old Jean thought that she was anxious to get back to Immortals Valley. "Are you sure you really want to bid Great General Gu farewell?" Yu Fu furrowed her brows and lifted open the quilt covering Great General Gu's body. Everyone saw her greatly disrespectful conduct, and just as everyone wanted to stop her, Yu Fu already coldly lifted her head. It was like she'd changed into another person. The childishness shed away from her eyes, leaving behind only seriousness. "Bring over 8 porcelain cups, then start a furnace fire. Prepare a bucket of warm water for bathing. Want the scalding hot kind," she methodically ordered, as she reached her little hand into her bosom, feeling around. And didn't feel it. One more time. She felt around for quite a while and had some of the hindering gold and silver hidden in her bosom all thrown next to Great General Gu's foot. At last, finally fishing out a roll of silver needles. She couldn't help letting out a smile, yet saw everyone behind her still blankly standing there, not even moving an inch. "What are you still standing there for? If you want to let your great general die, by all means don't listen to my words." Old Jean was just about to raise a question when he was stopped by Yin Hua Shi. "Quickly prepare according to Miss Yu Fu's instructions. Quickly go. Who cares whether she's a poison fairy or a medicine fairy? As long as there was a thread of hope in saving the great general, they won't give up." "Aye," Old Jean distractedly replied, then swiftly ran out the tent. Inside the large tent that had been densely crowded with people just now, aside from Yu Fu and Great General Gu, who was on the bed, only Old Jean and Yin Hua Shi remained. Yu Fu drank a mouthful of wine, sprayed it into the porcelain cup with a solemn expression, then lit a fire. She had the porcelain cup placed upside down on Great General Gu's body, densely covering up his abdomen. Afterwards, used her personal dagger to slice open his abdomen. Old Jean momentarily panicked and was about to go forward to stop her, but got pulled by the arm by Yin Hua Shi. He pointed to Yu Fu and quietly leaned in next to Old Jin's ear. "Don't you see that little poison fairy with a solemn look and a head full of sweat? If you go and interrupt her, what will happen to Great General? Our Great General has fought in the battlefields for decades, Would he still be scared of a little dagger? Old Jean saw the sweat endlessly dripping from Yu Fu's forehead and immediately understood in his heart. Ever since she decided she was going to save Great General Gu, she became abnormally serious, completely not like her naive and cute appearance from before. If her attention wasn't extremely focused on the task at hand, it was impossible to sweat like this on this spring day. She genuinely wants to save our great general. It must be tough for a little girl like her. Just don't know if. The usually good-natured Yin Huasher unexpectedly glared at him, preventing him from saying inauspicious words. Old Jean immediately shut his mouth. Done. As soon as Yu Fu spoke, the two simultaneously looked towards the bed. Great General Gu's stomach blood was everywhere, and half his intestines were fished out. Old Jean's eyes widened in shock when he saw. Yu Fu, realizing not good, hurriedly stuffed the intestines back in. This time, even Yin Huasher couldn't help but widen his eyes. Yu Fu was afraid that they might recklessly do something, hastily pulled out the thread and needle and had Great General Gu's stomach sewn shut. Bring the hot water and have my silver needles washed clean. Old Jean was even more dumbstruck. What? You had us prepare hot water for washing the needles? Is this little poison fairy reliable or not? Looking at the wound she stitched up, even countryside pig neuterers would sew better than her. Yu Fu noticed his gaze and immediately became discontent. I'm a little poison fairy, not a stomach stitching specialist. If you think my sewing is ugly, then come sew it yourself. Her little hand holding the needle was raised before Old Jin's eyes with all her might. She had painstakingly used up half her strength, and this Old Jin actually still dared to question her? Truly, to destroy the bridge after crossing it. Yu Fu pouted, with a displeased look on her face. Yin Huasher took it to heart, inwardly thinking in his heart about her every move. Read latest chapters at Wuxia World. Just earlier, when she was performing her treatment, she was solemn and unapproachable. But now, she reverted back to her lovable, silly self. Looks like the great general is fine now? Just as he was guessing in his heart, he suddenly heard Great General Gu let out a stuffy groan from the bed. Great General Gu, who'd been poisoned by the Kunlun snow poison and at his last breath, was already cured. Great General Gu, who'd been poisoned by the Kunlun snow poison and at his last breath, was already cured. Naturally, there was someone who went to spread this good news. In an instant, everyone in the entire army camp all learned of this. Everyone's emotions were all worked up. So great. Great General's poison has been cured. Yeah, and right now, he's already awake. All the generals went to visit. It's all thanks to that little medicine. Little poison fairy. Now that Great General Gu's Kunlun snow poison was cured, Yu Fu naturally became revered as an honorable guest. Even Old Jin, this impulsive fellow, this time also became a meritorious subject for having merit in saving the great general. For a moment, he was still unable to react. His entire person stupidly in a daze. Originally, he thought that he'd messed up greatly, but unexpectedly and unintentionally, this little poison fairy actually could also cure poison. He'd originally assumed that only medicine fairies could save people, and poison fairies could only kill people. Great General Gu has practiced martial arts since childhood, his body strong and sturdy. As soon as the poison was cured, he quickly woke up. Of course, a part of the reason was waking from the pain. When Yu Fu had split open his stomach and fished out his intestines, she hadn't given him any numbing medicine to drink. He tried to sit up from the bed, but a sharp pain suddenly came from his abdomen. He lowered his head to look at his own body, only seeing a fairly large cut on his abdomen, and on it, carelessly sewn messy threads. Carefully looking at it, that shiny and glistening thread was even golden threads, like the kind used for embroidering luxurious clothes. His scalp suddenly felt numb. He'd heard that it was a 10-or-so-year-old little girl that cured his poison. Could it be that this thread she used was her embroidery thread? Startled, Great General Gu's foot slightly moved and unexpectedly kicked something hard. The others detected his movements and had the brocade quilt by his foot lifted, surprisingly discovering several ingots of gold and silver, sizes all varying. The quality, relative purity of gold and silver, seemingly excellent. He questioned the others with a meaningful glance. Just then, Yin Huasher finally recalled, these gold and silver were Yu Fu's. Replying to Great General earlier, in order to save you, Miss Yu Fu, in a moment of impatience, had these things left here. A little girl carrying this many gold and silver for what? Great General Gu became increasingly curious towards this little poison fairy. Since she's my life-saver, quickly invite her over for a chat.
Yes.
Yin Huasher replied, and not long after had Yu Fu brought over. Seeing her first glance, Great General Gu was even more shocked than he'd imagined. He'd thought that at least she should still be a little girl close to marriageable age, yet didn't expect the Yu Fu before his eyes was a ball of childishness. To have this level of medical skills at such a young age, indeed hard to come by. Just her stitching was a bit ugly. Yu Fu curiously stared at him with her large eyes. When this Great General Gu had his eyes closed, he already made people feel unlimited pressure. As expected, with his eyes opened, he didn't disappoint. However, this kind of bearing wasn't violent and intimidating, only making one feel sincere respect for him. Yu Fu suddenly smiled. The two dimples on her cheeks bloomed like pear blossoms, making one can't help but guess already this beautiful at such an age. If she were to grow up into an adult, wouldn't she make everyone in the world envy to death? This smile made Great General Gu even more curious. There has never been a child, after seeing him, that dared to smile without him saying anything. This rather made him feel very warm inside. Little miss, I am the Easternling's Great General, Gu Huaijiang. Thank you very much for saving my life. He was honored as the dignified Great General, and also held a nobility title, yet he humbly introduced himself like this, making Yu Fu have a favorable impression of him. She also introduced herself. I'm the Immortals Valley's little poison fairy. I'm called Yu Fu. Don't know how old Miss Yu Fu is this year? As Gu Huaijiang said this, he directed his gaze towards her. At first glance, he immediately saw the glistening pearl necklace on her neck, and also the gorgeous pearls inlaid in her clothes. He was very curious. Even young ladies of noble families, when going out, wouldn't dress this fancy either, not to mention carrying this much gold and silver. Yu Fu straightened her back, attempting to let herself look a bit more taller. How could this little movement be hidden from these people's eyes? The corner of Gu Huaijiang's lip slightly hooked, then very quickly went back down. However, old Jean, who was to the side, burst into laughter. Ha ha, you look like 10 years old max. Our young general, when he was 7 or 8, was many times taller than you. Yu Fu flitted a glance over. A little miss as pretty as White Dango was lovable and cute even when glaring at someone. Gu Huaijiang gave old Jean a look, and the latter could only pretend to look scared, obediently shutting his mouth. There's also little girls that grow slower. No need to compare with boys. Gu Huaijiang said with a smile. I have 6 sons. All grew very fast, yet I've always wanted a daughter. Unfortunately, when he got to the word unfortunately, his smile gradually turned bitter. Yu Fu tilted her little head and puzzlingly asked, Unfortunately what? Yin Huasher quickly shook his head lightly at her, indicating for her to not pursue this matter anymore. Gu Huaijiang, on the contrary, didn't avoid either. Unfortunately, my wife, on her 5th pregnancy, because was pregnant with twins, died from a difficult birth. Yu Fu slightly opened her little mouth. Never thought that such a brilliant and famous great general like Gu Huaijiang was also a passionate person. When his gaze shifted back onto Yu Fu again, it appeared a bit wet. His dignified and solemn gaze also turned exceptionally warm. He looked to Yu Fu, just like seeing his own ideal daughter. At the time, there was a woman who once cuddled in his arms, stroking her slightly bulged belly, saying this time, she must give birth to a daughter for him. A beautiful jade-like daughter. Gu Huaijiang suddenly laughed. I've let Miss Yu Fu see something embarrassing. That's right. I heard that old Jean had forcibly brought you back. I will apologize to you on his behalf. If you're willing to wait another 2 days, once my wound is healed, I will personally send you back to the Immortals Valley. Old Jean and Yin Huasher watched from the sides and couldn't help glancing to one another. Today's Gu Huaijiang seemed to be particularly different, unsure if it's because he just had his stomach split open or what. In their impression, he seemingly has never been this warm towards a child before. The 6 young masters in the manor were all strictly brought up by him since they were small, and in front of him, they didn't dare to be unbridled in the slightest. The young general is Great General's eldest son. His military expertise among the young masters are the best, and he is also doted on the most by the Great General. But even he didn't receive this kind of treatment before either. Looks like the Great General likes little Miss Yufu very much. Old Jean moved closer to Yin Huashi's ear and quietly muttered, "Exactly so." Although Yin Huashi didn't say it out loud, he still silently agreed in his heart. Read latest chapters at Wuxia World. EU suffering from a serious injury needed 100 days to heal, let alone Gu Huaijiang right now had been split open. How could he still personally send Yufu back to Immortal's Valley? Yufu personally did it herself, she was aware inside. Hearing Gu Huaijiang saying it like that, she tilted her little head and pondered for a moment, then suddenly coming to an idea. This rather isn't necessary. If Great General wants to repay me, how about letting me be your daughter? The 4th month, the end of spring, the imperial capital Linen precisely had a good scenery. The 4th month, the end of spring, the imperial capital Linen precisely had a good scenery. At the outskirts of Linen City, the brilliant and distinguished Eastern Ling's great army was neatly and orderly advancing towards the imperial capital. Along the way, the surrounding forest was lush, water and grass abundant, and wild flowers wildly blossomed everywhere. The army flag was prominent, and that majestic brushwork of the character Gu, dignified and imposing. Inside an inconspicuous blue-roofed horse carriage, someone lightly lifted the curtains, carefully stretching out a pair of eyes. Those eyes were like that of a small forest deer, limpid and carrying a gloss of cleverness, full of curiosity and excitement. She looked at the scenery outside the horse carriage and couldn't help praising her own decision in her heart. Following Gu Huaijiang to Eastern Ling's imperial capital Linen originally was just a spur of the moment for her, but who knew the scenery here would be this good? Gu Huaijiang concealed her identity and quietly had her brought back to the imperial capital. He then told her some Eastern Ling's local customs and practices. Finally did she learn that girls, when sitting inside a horse carriage, couldn't stretch their head out, and further couldn't have half the body all stuck out either. A short while later, she saw a lofty city gate appear in front. The ever-extending city gates, unable to see the edge. When they reached below the city gates, she further felt the imposing might. So this was the imperial capital, Linen. Marquis, His Majesty has ordered this one to come welcome you. Congratulations, Marquis, for returning in triumph. Sitting inside the horse carriage, Yufu suddenly heard a sharp voice, like they were speaking with their throat pinched. This person called themselves Zia Jia, presumably a court eunuch from the palace. Afterwards, she heard Gu Huaijiang say a few words of courtesy, then brought along a few personal attendants, and spurred the horse forward to proceed into the city. Following behind was naturally Yufu's horse carriage. Following along straight down the capital city's main street, the Gu Manor sat on the edge of the imperial palace. That was the best district for the official residences of court officials. Yufu secretly looked out from the carriage window, only seeing the manor's lofty front gate, with jade pillars and cinnabar paint, bright and dazzling to the eyes. Up above, erected the words Great General Marquis Manor in gold lacquer on the horizontal inscription board, and underneath it stood 5 young men dressed in splendid brocade and lined orderly in a row. At first glance, every single one were all extraordinarily handsome, each with different personality. Presumably, this was the Marquis Manor's young masters. But didn't Gu Huaijiang say he had 6 sons? This son welcomes father back home. In the young men's uniform voices, it revealed happiness and the meaning of reunion after a long separation. Heard father met with the Western Kuran people scheme at the borders and nearly died from poison. We were all burning from worry. Now seeing father return safely, truly a great fortune. The young man that spoke was the eldest among the 5, approximately 18-19 years old. His appearance was entirely different from Gu Huaijiang's imposing look, with fair white skin and a slightly smooth chin. A pair of slender phoenix-like eyes, when he spoke, glistened with energy. His handsomeness bordered on the edge of grace, rather unlike someone born from a military lineage, but more like a distinguished wealthy young master on horseback. He was also the type that girls liked very much. Jyogu, your eldest brother isn't here. So in the manner you are the oldest. It must be very tough for you to take care of everything. So it turns out he was Gu Huaizhang's second son, Gu Jiogu. The 18th of the 4th month is eldest paternal aunt's 50th birthday. After eldest brother heard news that father was in good health, he then rushed to Jinling to congratulate eldest aunt for her birthday. Just as Yu Fu was watching intently, she suddenly saw a young master standing in the very back, seemingly noticing her peeping. He pulled the sleeve of the person next to him, and the two of them looked towards the horse carriage together. Finally then did Yu Fu realize that these two looked exactly the same. No more than 15-16 years of age, yet to be fully grown, but their features were already unusually good-looking. Gu Huaizhang's sons, each surpassed the other in looks. Don't know how that eldest young master that went to go congratulate their paternal aunt looked like. Seems they are Gu Huaizhang's youngest twin sons that he spoke of, Gu Xiang and Gu Yi. Yu Fu come. As soon as Gu Huaizhang spoke, a servant went forward and parted carriage screen. Yu Fu half rose from her seat and got out of the carriage. That servant then crouched on the ground, using his back as a foot cushion. Yu Fu slightly frowned. Her little body paused atop the horse carriage. Afterwards, she suddenly burst out her energy from playing leapfrog in her youth in the valley, and at once leaped over that servant, steadily landing on the ground. Hearing the sound, the servant was startled and quietly lifted his head to look. Yu Fu was already heading towards the manor gates. From the surrounding came chattering laughter. Unknown as to who began to laugh first, but eventually that laughter became more and more loud. Gui almost started snorting like a pig from laughing so hard, and quickly covered his mouth. Losing their composure like this in front of Gu Huaijiang would result in getting punished to kneel in the ancestral halls. He couldn't help lifting his head to peek at Gu Huaijiang's expression, yet saw him also unable to hold back his smile. Yu Fu lowered her head and straightened up the pearl necklace on her neck. She'd used too much strength in that leap just now. Don't know if her hair messed up or not. The crowd of young masters finally had a chance to measure her up and down. Her face was white and tender, about 10 years of age, yet unreasonably good-looking. She was wearing a silvery red brocade jacket and many jade and pearl bracelets and such, each and every one all uncommon goods. If an ordinary girl dressed like this, who knows how tacky it would be? But worn on Yu Fu's body, it instead nicely contrasted her natural innocence. Then carefully thinking back to her actions just now, jumping off the horse carriage, rather to mess up her hair ornaments than to step on a person's back. This kind of little miss? Who could she be? From now on, Yu Fu is your younger sister. This is your father's first time back in the capital, and must enter the palace to report to His Majesty. I'll give Yu Fu to you all to take care of. Gu Huaijiang only left behind these words, before he hurriedly spurred his horse forward and left. Everyone all looked to each other. What did he mean? From now on she's their younger sister? Could it be that father, after having been widowed for more than 10 years, finally thought things through and found a woman outside? The 5 young masters all lowered their heads and studied Yu Fu. Coming closer, they finally realized that Yu Fu was indeed too short. Compared with the tallest, second young master, Gu Jiogu, she only reached his waist. Yu Fu sensed that she was gradually getting surrounded, and strenuously lifted her head to look at the 5 of them. The 5 of them felt exhausted from lowering their heads, and Yu Fu also felt exhausted from lifting her head. Read latest chapters at Wuxia World. EU. The atmosphere seemingly went silent, and the two sides stood in opposition, with a large disparity in strength and some slight ill intentions. A good while later, Gu Jiogu slightly narrowed his phoenix eyes and slowly spoke. Little girl, who's your mother? T/N. Regarding how the dates are translated, the dates in the novel follow lunar calendar rather than the Gregorian calendar, which is why the months are just translated as numbers. His narrowed eyes looked very dangerous, but also very alluring. His narrowed eyes looked very dangerous, but also very alluring. Yu Fu also copied his look and narrowed her eyes, staring back at him without weakening in the slightest. My mother got lost. She was speaking of that mother her master hired for her. Got lost? Gu Jiugu crookedly hooked his lips and mischievously smiled. Naturally, he didn't believe her words. Not just him. Next to him, the third young master, who held a cold expression this whole time, Gu Hanemo, and the gently smiling fourth young master, Gu Wenqing, as well as the twins, Gu Xiang and Gu Yi, all continued to stare at Yu Fu with curious gazes. They attempted to find some traces of resemblance of the great general from her face. Yu Fu instead lowered her head suddenly, breaking off their line of sight. She'd raised her head for too long, so her neck was terribly sore. Thus she used her hand to massage the back of her neck. At the same time, a soft rumbling sound came from her stomach. All the young masters blanked. Yu Fu pitifully lifted her face and pouted her tender pink lips. I'm hungry. Gu Jiugu stared blankly, while Gu Xiang and Gu Yi already began to secretly laugh, but got glared at by Gu Hanemo and immediately shut up. This third brother has always been the coldest, sometimes every more stern than their father. The two of them, as the youngest brothers, didn't dare to be unbridled in the slightest. Nevertheless, it was Gu Wenqing that pulled along Yu Fu's hand. Let's go. I'll take you to eat something. His palm was warm, and he very lightly pulled along Yu Fu, fearing that he would hurt an ice-sculpted snow-built little doll. That smile was like the spring breeze brushing by, carrying within it the sweet aroma of peach blossoms. Yu Fu sweetly smiled. Thank you, fourth brother. Gu Huaijiang followed along the long street, and a short while later, arrived outside the palace. The imperial guards guarding the gates were also people of the military. Half among them, all had worked under Gu Huaijiang before. Seeing him, they all respectfully greeted. He flipped down from the horse, his movements smooth and agile, completely unable to tell that a month ago, he'd nearly died from poisoning. Following his movements, his battle gown fluttered. Amidst the flourishing blossom like brocades of the imperial palace, he emitted the aura of the battlefield. This kind of aura made the imperial guards at the palace gates all subconsciously straighten their backs. He causally tossed aside the reins. Take good care of this Marquis's horse. Someone steadily caught the reins. His Majesty has specially allowed Marquis to ride the horse into the palace, but when not during a state of emergency, Marquis has never misused this privilege. This lower official very much admires. Gu Huaijiang lightly smiled, but didn't reply. He stepped into the palace city with wide strides. Behind him, followed 5 commanding officers, all with intimidating auras like dragons and tigers, standing out very much in this extravagant palace city. The passing palace maids and servants greeted them as they met, burning their image into their hearts. So Marquis Gu has returned. Judging from that posture of theirs, our battle at the western Kuan borders must have resulted in a victory. When Gu Huaijiang walked far, the palace maids, who had their heads lowered and bodies bent, began softly gossiping. When Marquis Gu sets out, when has he ever lost? You've only seen the general's prestige and brilliance, yet don't know that in the past, when Marquis Gu brought the 6 young masters into the palace together, that scene was what's called valiant and formidable. An older palace maid began reminiscing. Her eyes were filled with the color of fascination. Upon the golden halls, His Majesty and numerous court officials have already been waiting a long time. The barbarians of Western Kuan likes war, repeatedly invading our eastern Ling borders. The thieving heart does not die. Fortunately, we have Marquis Gu to help bring peace and stability to the country. With you at the borders, this emperor can sleep peacefully in the imperial capital. Ning Emperor stroked his slightly white beard and smiled very contently at Gu Huaijiang. The numerous court officials in the hall all echoed in agreement, submitting cheerfully to his outstanding military service. Only Prime Minister Yin, who was standing at the highest position on the left-hand side, wearing a dark purple cloud pattern brocade with a pure gold cordon belt at his waist. His wide sleeves were gathered at this front, as he stood there silently without a word. On his face, there was slight displeasure. Gu Huaijiang and His Majesty have known each other since youth, so naturally he understood His Majesty's praise towards him comes from sincerity, yet he still modestly cupped his hand in a bow. Your Majesty overpraises. It is your majesty's effective governing in the court that has allowed Eastern Ling's power to grow rich and powerful. That's why this subject is able to repeatedly triumph over our enemies at the borders. Above, there is the wise ruler. In the middle, there's the virtuous court officials, and below, there's the loyal and brave soldiers. It is not the merit of this subject alone. Despite clearly knowing that these were just modest remarks, Ning Emperor still was delighted when he heard. Good, since Marquis Gu said it as such, then pass on this emperor's decree, arrange a feast outside the city to celebrate, rewarding the Gu family army. After the dust settled and the golden palace halls cleared, Gu Huaijiang was in a hurry to rush back to the Marquis Manor. He was still concerned about Yu Fu at the manor. Although his sons were all accomplished, there wasn't even a single servant girl in the Marquis Manor. This was their first time coming in contact with a little miss. Don't know if they know how to take care of her. But unexpectedly, upon exiting the palace hall door, he was stopped in his path under the long corridors. Uncle Gu, a young and beautiful girl in a palace dress, approached with a smile, not more than 15 to 16 years of age, with the noble air of the imperial family coming from her. Gu Huaijiang nodded his head in courtesy. Princess Danyang, best address me as Marquis as per etiquette. I truly dare not bear the honor of being called uncle. How many times have I told you, this is imperial father's idea? Princess Danyang smiled slightly with the intention to curry favor. Among that smile, there exists the reverence towards an elder, and also foreboding towards him as a man of the battlefield. Imperial father said, Uncle Gu and Imperial father have been friends since youth, and you've also bravely fought for Eastern Ling soaked in blood for many years. In name, he and you are ruler and subject, but in his heart, he only views you as an elder brother. Gu Huaijiang slightly smiled, still only saying he didn't dare for such honor. Princess Danyang's eyes turned, finally cutting into the main topic. Why didn't Brother Shu Bai accompany you into the palace today? The tip of Gu Huaijiang's brows slightly lifted, very quickly understanding her intentions. This address of Uncle Gu, turns out, was just to fool others, only for the sake of being able to reasonably call Gu Shu by Big Brother. The campaign this time was extremely dangerous. I didn't take them with me to the battlefield, so naturally I came alone to report to His Majesty. Shu Bai had some matters to take care of in Jinling. Does Princess have business with him? Facing Gu Huaijiang's probing gaze, Princess Danyang felt somewhat embarrassed. No, nothing, just casually asking, that's all. Gu Huaijiang was about to take his leave, when who would have guessed, after having been delayed by Princess Danyang for a moment, those court officials already came out from behind. Seeing him still under the corridor, each and every one advanced dauntlessly in waves to fawn on him. Gu Huaijiang's complexion changed. Princess Danyang was self-aware that she's caused trouble. If not for her stopping Gu Huaijiang, at this moment, he wouldn't have to be dealing with those smooth-talking ministers. Since Uncle Gu is busy, then I'll take my leave first. As she spoke, she awkwardly smiled, and then hastily left with her maids. Gu Huaijiang was already confined by a crowd. Read latest chapters at Wuxia World. Eub Marquis has once again attained outstanding military service this time. This lower official congratulates Marquis. Heard this time Western Kuan invaded aggressively. Originally thought it would be a fierce battle, but unexpectedly, Marquis was able to finish them this quickly. Truly brilliant. Indeed, in front of Marquis, we all are inferior like weed, still hoping for Marquis to give pointers. Gu Huaijiang, who was encircled by the crowd of officials, carried a polite smile on his face. Suddenly, he inadvertently caught sight of someone walking out of the palace hall and fixedly heading straight in the direction of the palace gates. Prime Minister Yin. Prime Minister Yin. Gu Huaijiang was born from a military lineage, his figure lofty. Despite being surrounded in the middle of a bunch of officials, his line of sight was not obstructed in the least. Seeing that person keeping away from the crowd, he quickly called out to stop him, and at the same time, used the opportunity to walk out of the encircling crowd. Being called out, Yin Yen stopped in his tracks and faintly lifted up his jaw, as he aloofly stood in his original spot, waiting for Gu Huaijiang. When Gu Huaijiang approached, he then continued walking forward. The gold belt on his dark purple official's gown was particularly dazzling and straight. In the court of Eastern Ling, when the two with the noblest status walked together, others naturally all withdrew. Gu Huaijiang stood alongside him shoulder to shoulder. Although his figure was much taller than him, but when he spoke, he deliberately lowered his head, making his posture appear very humble. Prime Minister Yin has had it rough recently. I've been at the borders for a long time, so the matters of the court still need to trouble Prime Minister to spare the effort. This originally was just the ever-so-common words of courtesy, yet Prime Minister Yin suddenly halted his steps. A pair of sharp eyes gazed towards Gu Huaijiang. It carried hostility. What is Marquis Gu saying? As the Prime Minister, this official naturally needs to expend the effort for the matters of the court. How is it related to whether Marquis Gu has been at the borders for a long time or not? Gu Huaijiang was choked by his words. Although was born into a military family, his temper wasn't irritable. Towards this prime minister who was always hostile towards him, he furthermore showed consideration for. When he was about to open his mouth, he just saw Yin Yin look behind him, exposing a mocking smile. It's better if Marquis Gu doesn't walk together with this official. This official doesn't know how to say any flattering words. If Marquis Gu wants to hear, there's naturally plenty of people behind you that want to say. With that said, he snorted through his nose, lifted his foot, and walked away, not even bowing to bid a farewell. Old Jean, who was following behind Gu Huaijiang, instantly got angry. Great General, what is that attitude of his? If not for little Miss Yu Fu, you would have died from poison this time. You've risked your life for Eastern Ling for decades. Why should you still have to endure this bird brain's anger? The two words, bird brain, were used rather cleverly, causing the usually calm Yin Huashi to also smile. How is he not? Prime Minister Yin's character is harsh and easily jealous, and his name is also called Falcon, Yin. In private, the court officials gave him a nickname called Big Black Falcon. Isn't he precisely a bird? T/N. Not really the meaning of the characters for his name, but just characters that sound the same. Gu Huaijiang turned his head and silently glanced at the two of them. Just a glance, yet it was even more terrifying than being strictly reprimanded. Old Jean and Yin Huashi both didn't dare to continue talking nonsense and simultaneously shut their mouths. How many times have I told you to? You mustn't rashly discuss the court officials behind their back. Prime Minister Yin, although handles things inappropriately sometimes, he is still honored as the Prime Minister. The discord between the General and Prime Minister is bound to cause meaningless conflict in court. Wouldn't this only increase Eastern Ling's internal friction? The people of Western were barbaric and warlike and repeatedly invaded Eastern Ling. Eastern Ling's peace and prosperity wasn't as stable as it appeared on the surface. If he were to lose a single battle at the borders, don't know how many commoners at the border station will perish from the massacre. That's why he particularly wished for the stability of the imperial court and unwilling to have any conflict with Prime Minister Yin. But for the two to be in harmony, it can't just be Great General you wishing for it alone. That bird, that Prime Minister Yin isn't willing to be friendly and always resent out of jealousy your feats. Yet you time and time again humble yourself to get close to him. This one really can't keep on watching anymore. The two of them were both Gu Huaijiang's close subordinate, so naturally they couldn't bear to watch Gu Huaijiang be slighted. Clearly the one His Majesty favors and trusts the most was Gu Huaijiang, and the one the court officials supported the most was also Gu Huaijiang. Yet he always yielded out of courtesy to Yin Yin. This is nothing. If humbling myself some in front of Prime Minister Yin can bring peace and stability to the court in exchange, then I'm wholeheartedly willing to do so. Gu Huaijiang didn't care at all, only leaving behind these words, and headed towards the palace gates in large strides. Old Jean and Yin Huashi could only look to one another and helplessly followed after. Once he returned to the Marquis Manor, Gu Huaijiang asked about Yu Fu first thing. Marquis, little Miss Yu Fu is currently in 5th Young Master and 6th Young Master's courtyard. The amicable-looking old steward went up and replied. Gu Huaijiang gave him a glance and slightly furrowed his brows. How many times have I told you? You're already elderly in years, so no need to come up and serve. Qizhou is very skillful around the manor, so don't worry about this many things. The old steward was called Qian. This year he was already 70, and an old servant that once served the elder generation. Gu Huaijiang has always been respectful towards him. The servants in the manor also revered this old steward like half a master. The old man slightly lowered his head and said with a smile, "This one is indebted to Marquis taking pity on these old bones and letting my son, Qizhou, continue serving at the manor's steward. Just receiving Marquis's benevolence, how can I just sit at home and enjoy myself? If I don't come up to serve Marquis and the young masters, my heart is difficult to be at peace." Gu Huaijiang listened to his words and thought to instruct Qizhou later to not let his old father stress over these things. "Then come with me to 5th young master and 6th young master's courtyard for a look." As soon as they entered Gu Xiang and Gu Yi's courtyard, they heard the sound of cheerful laughter inside, mixed with a girl's delicate childlike voice. What dessert is this? Just hearing the little girl's voice, they could imagine her gluttonous little appearance. Gu Huaijiang stood outside the door, using his hand to stop the servants from going to report and listen to the movements inside. "This is flaky pastry. You've never had a flaky pastry before?" Gu Yi had a face full of shock, with a look of a wealthy family young master not eating the food of the common mortals. He stood up and handed a piece of flaky pastry to Yu Fu. The gold flaky pastry emitted an enticing aroma. Yu Fu's little tongue licked her lips and stared at the pastry in Gu Yi's hand. She reached out her 2 hands to accept it. Just when Gu Yi was about to place the pastry into her palm, Gu Yi instead retracted his hand all of a sudden and shoved it into his own mouth. Yu Fu's complexion instantly turned into disappointment. Her little face looked pitiful, like she was about to cry. "Gu Yi." His twin older brother Gu Xiang furrowed his brow and berated Gu Yi. Yu Fu was still this small. If they were to tease her into tears, later when father returned, how were they going to explain? The latter looked to Yu Fu's pitiful expression and further felt delighted from his mischief. He began laughing out loud with the pastry still in his mouth. The golden flakes and crumbs in his mouth flew out along with his laughter. Yu Fu's stature was short, and standing next to him, she just happened to catch everything with the top of her head. Cough. Gu Huaijiang cleared his throat and entered the room. Gu Xiang and Gu Yi immediately straightened up. Gu Yi's mouth was still bulging from the flaky pastry. At this moment, he could neither swallow nor spit, and could only hold it in his cheek. Looking at him now, his handsome face, one side bulging, one side normal, appeared very cute. However, Gu Huaijiang wasn't amused by his appearance and only faintly glanced at the two of them. "Before I entered the palace today, what did I say to you all? Read latest chapters at Wuxia World." Gu Yi's head was buzzing. He knew that his father was interrogating and was extremely anxious. With great difficulty, he finally swallowed that large piece of pastry. Because he'd swallowed too forcefully, his neck reddened. However, he still quickly went forward to ask for Gu Huaijiang's forgiveness. Father said, "To treat Yu Fu like a younger sister. It's this son's fault. This son shouldn't have bullied younger sister." Qian, who was standing behind Gu Huaijiang, glanced to Gu Yi in praise. Thinking to himself, after being beat for this many years, he finally learned to how to extinguish Gu Huaijiang's anger before he explodes. Gu Huaijiang gave him a glance. Gu Huaijiang gave him a glance. "Come here." His tone was a little gentler than normal. Gu Yi was startled by the sudden favor, not daring to believe that his usually imposing father would be this gentle towards him. Just as he was about to go forward, he suddenly saw Yu Fu fluttering little hands flying towards Gu Huaijiang. So turns out he wasn't calling him. This flower bud bun that was combed with great difficulty is all dirty now. Gu Huaijiang lowered his head, searching for flaky pastry crumbs on Yu Fu's head, using his hand to help her remove them. He even had to be careful as to not mess up her hair. Her age was still small, so she couldn't comb her own hair properly. And in the army, there were only rough men, so there further wasn't anyone that could comb her hair for her. This hairstyle was when they temporarily stopped in the suburbs of the capital. A passing-by village woman saw her stick her head out from the horse carriage, and finding her lovable and cute, she couldn't help but fix her messy hair for her. Yu Fu had her head lowered, very naturally letting Gu Huaijiang dig around on the top of her head. However, Gu Xiang and Gu Yi to the side were both dumbfounded. When have they ever seen Gu Huaijiang be this good to a child? Even eldest brother, Gu Shubai, who's excelled in both character and his studies since youth, didn't get this kind of treatment either. Not only were they stunned, even Qian, who's served in the marquis manner his whole life, also seldomly seen Gu Huaijiang be this gentle. His old eyes slightly narrowed, sizing up little Yufu. Could it really be as the young master's guessed? This little miss was Marquis's illegitimate daughter from the outside? Marquis, ever since Madame passed, our manor doesn't even have a single servant girl. Only the back kitchen have a few old woman cooks. Miss Yufu doesn't have anyone at her side to take care of her. So how about letting this old servant's granddaughter Qi Ting come attend to her? Qi Ting was 15 years of age and was Qian's one and only granddaughter. Her father, Qi Zhou, also occupied an important position in the manor. So since childhood, she was also delicately raised like half-miss, very rarely doing rough work. Gu Huaijiang thought for a moment and then nodded. All right, otherwise, without a girl taking care of Yufu, I really won't feel at ease either. Qi Ting's age was suitable and was also Qian's granddaughter. Having her take care of Yufu, Gu Huaijiang felt reassured. Qian nodded in response, yet stormy waves stirred in his heart. He mentioned having Qi Ting come take care of Yufu partly in an attempt to sound out Gu Huaijiang, wanting to know just how much Gu Huaijiang cares about Yufu. Unexpectedly, Gu Huaijiang actually readily agreed. Looks like he really regards Yufu very highly. Then that guess, 9 times out of 10, is true. In the morning, I'd already ordered someone to pass on a message to sort out a clean courtyard. Has it been taken care of? Gu Huaijiang asked. And just as Qian was about to reply, Gu Xiang unexpectedly spoke first. Because don't know what father needed it for. Second brother ordered people to have all the usable courtyards in the manor all tidied up. Father wants to give to you food to live? As soon as Gui heard this, he became impatient. Father, just let Yufu live here with us. Older brothers all like living in their own courtyard, but we like the liveliness, so just let Yufu live together with us. Gu Xiang and Gui had only played with Yufu for half a day, yet in their hearts, towards this little sister, they already like her a lot. Even if they weren't born from the same mother, they still plan on taking care of Yufu. That's why, when Gu Huaijiang mentioned courtyards, Gui quickly opened his mouth to request letting Yufu live together with them. When Gu Huaijiang heard this, his face almost turned green. Behind him, Qian didn't know whether to laugh or cry, thinking to himself, their family's 6th young master was only 16, and still didn't understand the etiquette between male and female. Nonsense. Yufu is a young lady, how can she live together with you too? Just now, you were that improper, I still haven't punished you. Go to the ancestral hall yourself to receive 10 beating with the rod. With that said, he brushed his sleeves and led Yufu away, holding her little hand. Well, Gui originally could have escaped this calamity, but his words ended up bringing him 10 whole beatings. Gu Xiang say, why did father punish me? Although he's gotten used to getting beat since childhood and didn't really care about this mere 10 beatings, he still wanted to figure out the reason why. Gu Xiang was born only an hour earlier than him, but he faintly understood something. Because Yufu Shi is a girl. Gui curiously turned to look at him, like as if he didn't comprehend what the concept of a girl was. For as long as they could remember, the Marquis Manor has never had servant girls. Towards girls, this concept, they're truly unfamiliar with. And towards the concept of little sister, they were further unfamiliar with. Marquis, these courtyards have all been neatly tidied up. Where do you want Miss Yufu to live? Holding Yufu's little hand, Gu Huaijiang didn't dare to walk too fast, fearing that his strength might break her hand. Hearing Qian ask this, he stopped in his steps. After a moment of pondering, he crouched down and asked Yufu, our manor has many courtyards. Where do you want to live? Qian was dumbstruck. The heir was 20 this year, coming of age, and changed to a new courtyard. But Gu Huaijiang didn't let him pick for himself either. Unexpectedly, towards Yufu, he actually was this indulgent. Yufu wasn't mindful of Qian's astonishment in the least. In her eyes, Gu Huaijiang has always been a very benevolent elder, and a very dignified great general. Great general, I want to live a little closer to you. I don't know anyone here. If I'm closer to you, if something happens, I can still look for you. Because they met in the army camp, Yu Fu thus followed old Jin and them in calling Gu Huaijiang Great General. It has already become a habit. Gu Huaijiang normally only hear rough men call him this. Only a little miss like Yu Fu can make the words Great General come out softly and sweetly. It was surprisingly pleasant to hear. He nodded, feeling Yu Fu's thoughts were very reasonable. In the manor, which empty courtyards are the closest to the main courtyard? Gu Huaijiang stood up and asked Qian behind him. After all, the marquee manor was too big. He also couldn't remember clearly what all courtyards there were. Towards everything in the manor, Qian knew very well by heart and quickly replied, Pure fragrant courtyard is the closest, and that area along the lake still has 2-3 courtyards. They are also not far from Marquis's main courtyard. Gu Huaijiang shook his head. Pure fragrant courtyard is too small, and that area along the lake is too far. Then, Qian thought for a moment and said, Then there's only the western wing left. The western wing was actually a courtyard. That place was the closest to the main courtyard, only separated by a corridor with hanging flowers. The reason why it was called this was because back then, Gu Huaijiang especially wanted a daughter and said that in ancient times, daughters all have to live in the family's western wing. Thus, he specially opened up a neighboring courtyard, ordering people to nicely decorate the place, and also personally named the place Western Wing. Afterwards, Madame Gu died from a difficult birth while giving birth to Gu Xiang and Gu Yi, and this courtyard thus was sealed up. And in the manor, no one dared to mention again. If not for Gu Huaijiang ordering them to clean the courtyards this time, no one would have opened the Western Wing gates once more. Gu Huaijiang carried a bit of hesitation on his face. Read latest chapters at Wuxia World. Yu Fu, however, couldn't wait any longer and stood on her tippy toes, pulling his sleeve. Great General, what's wrong? Gu Huaijiang finally returned to his senses. Nothing. I'll take you to the Western Wing. Under the lovely spring sunlight, the Western Wing was like a sea of flower, making Yu Fu unable to walk from the sight. Under the lovely spring sunlight, the Western Wing was like a sea of flower, making Yu Fu unable to walk from the sight. Passing through outside the Marquis Manor's main courtyard, following along a little path bedded in pebbles, one can clearly see a winding low wall. The white stone steps below smooth and delicate, no more than 4 or 5 layers. Going up, one can see the arched gate with hanging flowers. There was no sign, no inscribed board on the door, instead expressing a trace of natural wildness. 2 fluttering butterflies flew out, seemingly as if they were welcoming the new master of the Western Wing. Yu Fu smiled as she clapped her hands. This place is nice. Our Immortals Valley also has many flowers. The butterflies love pecking my fingertip the most. As she said this, she reached her hand out, nimbly pinching her fingers into an orchid shape. That pair of dancing butterflies, as expected, landed on her finger. Gu Huaijiang raised his brow in surprise. Yu Fu instead pursed her lips and lightly blew, blowing away that pair of butterflies. She happily bounced towards the courtyard, only seeing below her feet a thin stream of spring water flowing by, and on there, a short and small bridge. On either side of the bridge, there was an elaborate handrail, with several crystal rui lanterns erect on there. Further inside, several peach blossom trees strive to stand out brilliantly, and a broad-leaved bajiao's dark green leaves extend out. Yu Fu smiled cutely. No need, just honey water is good. Thank you, big sister Qi. Read latest chapters at Wuxia World. EU Cheating felt delight inside hearing her repeatedly call her big sister Qi, and hurriedly turned to go to the kitchen to prepare honey water. Once her figure disappeared outside the Western Wing courtyard, Yu Fu stuck her head out and looked around, making sure that the servants Qian had sent were all not present. Finally, she relaxed. Yao Lan, quickly come out. This flaky pastry is delicious. In the main courtyard, Gu Huaijiang sat in the middle of the room, looking over a couple of transaction records, and repeatedly nodded his head. In the main courtyard, Gu Huaijiang sat in the middle of the room, looking over a couple of transaction records, and repeatedly nodded his head. Jiu has improved. With Bai Shu away, he alone managed to have the manor taken care of neat and orderly, and even was able to have his younger brothers taken care of well. Qian stood by the door. Hearing his words, he couldn't help but smile. Second young master is already 19 years old, and next year he'll be coming of age, so naturally he's made progress. Even third young master, fourth young master and them, all aren't children anymore either. They're able to take care of themselves well. Marquis can just rest assured. Gu Huaijiang lifted his head and glanced at him. Seeing him standing by the door with his back bent, he thus instructed him to sit down. Steward Qi, have a seat. You've been serving in this manner for decades now. You have more dignity than the young masters. No need to be this meticulous. Qian didn't humbly decline either and smilingly sat down halfway on the round chair below. That's right, Marquis. Don't know what dishes Miss Yufu likes to eat? This old servant has already ordered the kitchen to prepare extra dishes. Just don't know if they will suit Miss Yufu's taste. Speaking of Yufu, Gu Huaijiang affectionately smiled. No worries, she still isn't too familiar with our Eastern Ling's cuisine. Let her have a taste of all the different kinds of dishes of the imperial capital. That way, in the future, she'll know what she likes to eat and what she doesn't like to eat. Qian couldn't help but feel astonished inside. Could it be that Miss Yufu, she previously didn't live in the Eastern Ling borders? She previously had been living in the Immortals Valley the whole time. That is a place at the intersection of the three countries. There, the three countries' custom, etiquette, food and so on all mixed together. That's why she's still somewhat different from our Eastern Ling's young ladies. Qian finally understood. No wonder this old servant felt Miss Yufu was exceptionally lively and cute. Unlike the other upper-class noble family misses, who were all restricted since young to be gentle and quiet. As for whether gentle was good, or lively was good, he momentarily couldn't say either. But judging from Gu Huaijiang's complexion, he clearly felt lively was good. No, it's possible that as long as it was Yufu, regardless whether it was gentle or lively, he would all like? Qian glanced towards the outside. The sky was gradually darkening, the sun slowly inclining towards the west. It's almost time. This old servant will order someone to go invite Miss Yufu and the young masters to come dine right away. Qi Ting lead Yufu out of the western wing. It was even the same path from when they came. Passing through a small pebbled path, they arrived at the main courtyard. Gu Huaijiang's character and temperament was broad-minded, possessing elegance. His dwelling's slender jade bamboo was dense like a forest. Yufu looked around, while continuously nodding in her head. This wasn't far off from how she'd imagined Gu Huaijiang's residence to be. Qi Ting's expression was somewhat unhappy. From time to time, she would turn her head to look behind her. Yufu's little hand lead along a girl that was about the same size as her. This was a little girl that had appeared out of nowhere. Qi Ting had just went to the kitchen to pour some honey water, and came back seeing this little girl happily eating flaky pastries together with Yufu. She was both alarmed and annoyed that this unknown wild girl actually stole her place. Great General! Before Yufu even walked into the main hall, she already shouted for Gu Huaijiang, causing the servants serving below the corridor all look towards her. Eastern Ling was a country strict on etiquette. Yufu's behavior was somewhat rude. But when everyone saw the smile on her face, they all disregarded her mannerless conduct, instead feeling that she was very innocent and lively. Gu Huaijiang also didn't feel it was rude in the slightest. He liked Yufu's sweet voice carrying a smile and calling him Great General the most. When the footsteps approached, Gu Huaijiang eagerly raised his head, yet saw walking in Yufu holding the hand of an unfamiliar little servant girl. That little servant girl also appeared to be only 11 or 12, wearing plain and simple clothes. Her round face carried a shy but sincere smile. Great General, she's Yao Lan, the Yao Lan that I told you about before. Gu Huaijiang momentarily couldn't remember, but afterwards, as if suddenly coming to realization, pointed to Yao Lan in shock. You're saying, she's that maid that's been serving you since you were little, Yao Lan? Yufu happily nodded her head. But why would she appear here? An Immortals Valley's little servant girl soundlessly appeared in the Marquis Manor, and moreover, not a single manor guard detected her presence. How was this possible? Gu Huaijiang slightly knitted his brows and looked towards Qi and naturally was aware that this matter was of great concern, and thus hurriedly bowed to acknowledge his mistake. He was the manor's head steward. Anything that happens in the manor were all his responsibility. Seeing the situation, Yu Fu thought that Gu Huaijiang was angry, and thus reached her hand behind her back to tightly grasp Lan Yao's hand, indicating for her to not be scared. "Great General, are you angry?" As soon as Gu Huaijiang looked down, he saw Yu Fu's innocent pair of eyes, carrying a bit of panic. He quickly smiled and explained to her, pacifying her mood. No, I was just curious. How did she appear in the marquee manor?" Qi Ting lowered her head in shock. Just feeling that Gu Huaijiang's look just now was just like her father, Qi Zhou's, whenever he was coaxing her. But Qi Zhou was just a steward of the marquee manor, while Gu Huaijiang was Eastern Ling's dignified great general marquis that was below one and above thousands. How could he be this doting towards an illegitimate daughter? Qian was already accustomed to seeing and wasn't surprised. From when Gu Huaijiang helped clean the fragments out of her hair for her in front of Gu Xiang and Gu Yi, Qian had already understood his doting. Seeing him not get angry, Yu Fu finally let out a smile in relief. What's so strange about this? My master is the medicine god. If he wants to stuff a servant girl into the marquee manor, there were lots of ways. Great General doesn't need to worry. I suppose master is just worried about me, that's all. Gu Huaijiang nodded. He had brought Yu Fu from the borders near Immortals Valley all the way to Eastern Ling's imperial capital. Sun Qi as her master, being worried, is also reasonable. It's exactly as Yu Fu said. As the dignified god of medicine, for him to want to stuff a little servant girl into the marquee manor, it indeed wasn't difficult. He rather helplessly shook his head. What is your master thinking? Wanting for you to descend the mountain to train, yet also arranging a fake mother and a servant girl by your side. Where was this anything like training? When Yao Lan heard these words, she looked to Gu Huaijiang in confusion. Training? So this was what Yu Fu said to them. Yu Fu pulled on Yao Lan's hand behind her, indicating for her to not expose her. She stuck out her tongue. But I'm this small, coming down the mountain alone to train. Wasn't that just looking for death? That is also true. She just exited the mountains, when her hired mother got scared away by the troops, and she herself also got kidnapped back by old Jean. Read latest chapters at Wuxia World. EU if she'd encountered bad guys, afraid she would have long gotten into trouble. Don't worry, with me here. You can train however you like in Eastern Ling. You can even walk sideways. Gu Huaijiang carefully avoided her flower bud hair and patted the top of her head with a smile. His appearance exceptionally gentle. T/N. The releases for this novel will slowly pick up faster as time goes on. I'm still trying to work out a good work schedule to balance everything. Gu Huaijiang and Yu Fu's talk of something Immortals Valley and something Gu Huaijiang and Yu Fu's talk of something Immortals Valley and something Shifu, training, and whatnot made Qian and Qi Ting both confused. Wasn't Yu Fu Guai Huaijiang's illegitimate daughter on the outside? How did she also become the Immortals Valley god of medicine's disciple? Rumor has it that god of medicine Sun Qi's medical skills were superb, able to make white bones grow flesh and revive the dead. Yu Fu was so young. How could she be his disciple? The grandfather and grandchild pair glanced at one another, both not understanding the meaning behind this, and outside, clear rhythmic sounds of approaching footsteps already sounded. This sound was very familiar. Only the military lineage-born Gu Jiugu and such was able to march this resolutely resoundingly. Hearing from far away, it sounded like a piece of melody. Yu Fu seemingly heard too, and stretched her head out to look outside. Gu Jiegu entered through hanging screen. His figure was tall and elegant, walking in slow and deliberate steps, with smiles stuck on the corner of his mouth. Gu Hanemo still had a face covered in cold frost, just like as if he would never smile. Yu Fu glanced towards the back, seeing Gu Wenqing smilingly walking in, and immediately pounced over. Fourth brother, Gu Xiang and Gu Yi, who were walking behind Gu Wenqing, upon seeing this, heart-ached like getting cut by a knife. Yu Fu, since you hugged fourth brother, do you want to give me a hug too? Look at my butt. It's all because of you that I endured 10 beatings with the military rod. Gui said as he turned around and stuck out his butt. Gu Xiang hurriedly pushed his butt back down. Hurts. Gui cried out and was just about to yell at Gu Xiang, asking why he pushed his butt, when he suddenly saw Gu Xiang giving him a look. Then did he finally notice Gu Huaijiang looking at him very disapprovingly, very much with the intention of giving him another 10 beatings with the rod. He could only obediently stand still on the spot. Yu Fu thought for a moment, then went up and gave Gu Xiang a hug. Gu Xiang, who got hugged, was overwhelmed by the sudden favor. He quietly glanced at Gu Huaijiang's face, and seeing him not get angry, finally reached out and hugged Yu Fu back. Unfortunately, Yu Fu was too short, her head only reaching his chest, so he could only hug up to Yu Fu's neck. Fu Yu got up and made a face at Gu Yi. Fourth brother took me to eat lunch. Fifth brother gave me snacks. You dirted by little flower bun. I'm not going to give you a hug. As she spoke, she even made pouting sounds, making even Gu Jiugu can't help but laugh. He suddenly felt somewhat regretful. If he'd known, he would have taken Yu Fu to go eat, and not ask her who her mother was. Now great, the one Yu Fu liked the most wasn't him. This realization made Gu Jiugu very disheartened. Gu Hanamo still had a cold face, but he flitted Gu Jiugu a glance and suddenly hooked the corner of his mouth. Among us 6 brothers of the Marquis Manor, it has always been second brother that's most liked by girls, but Yu Fu likes fourth brother the most. Second brother must be very hurt. Life is hard enough as it is, don't rub it in. These words, could it be that Gu Hanamo didn't understand? The corner of Gu Jiuji's brow twitched. He was born good-looking and was used to winning the favors of girls. There has still never been a girl that didn't fall for him. Who knew that today he would get laughed at by Gu Hanamo, this unapproachable ice face? He sarcastically retorted, third brother isn't liked by girls anyways. This bit is still the same. Gu Hanmo's cold face instantly turned awkward. While these 2 brothers were whispering to one another here, on Yu Fu and Gu Yi's side, the 2 were also intensely arguing. Yet, Gu Weiqing and Gu Xiang, who were in the middle, carried a cheerful expression on their faces. Getting hugged by Yu Fu was just like directly running into a lump of cloud, soft and fluffy. Taking a bit, one would discover that it was actually sweet cotton candy. If every day they can get hugged by Yu Fu, how beautiful would life be? No wonder Gu Yi wanted to live together with Yu Fu, and for this, even got punished by Gu Huaijiang with the military rod. All right, all of you have a seat at the table. I have some important matters to announce to you all. Gu Huaijiang smilingly watched Yu Fu and Gu Yi make noise, feeling this was precisely the kind of warm scene he and his wife had wanted in the past. They only had sons at home. If there was a little daughter, the atmosphere definitely would have been completely different. Sure enough, the usual solemn mealtime atmosphere, with Yu Fu present, instantly lightened up. Everyone, although all didn't talk, their faces all carried a smile, waiting for Gu Huaijiang to announce the important matters. Gu Jiugu was more interested in Yu Fu's mother's current whereabouts. If she really was Gu Huaijiang's outside mistress, then she should be brought back and given a yin-yang title, so as to take care of his everyday life. In the vast Eastern Ling, where was there a man like Gu Huaijiang, who has reached the highest official position, widowed for many years, unwilling to remarry, and didn't even have a single concubine? Gu Huaijiang cleared his throat. I've already told you all today. From now on, Yu Fu will be your younger sister. In the future, she is the manor's 7th miss, my foster daughter in name. Do you all understand? Foster daughter in name. Then what was she in actuality? The part everyone wanted to hear the most, Gu Huaijiang instead didn't say. Gu Xiang and Gu Yi were both still young in age. Seeing Gu Huaijiang seemingly not planning explaining Yu Fu's origins, impatiently scratched their ears. During the day, they'd asked Yu Fu once before too. Yu Fu only said she came from the Immortals Valley, and her mother got lost. But to force Gu Huaijiang to say it, they didn't dare either, and could only cast their gazes towards Gu Jiugu. Eldest brother wasn't here, so he was the eldest among the young masters at the moment. If one has to ask, then it should be him asking. Getting stared at by several burning gazes, Gu Jiugu had no choice but to look towards Gu Huaijiang. Father, we all want to know. What is Yu Fu's real identity? If she really is of father's blood, asking father to please tell us clearly. Fu Yu's eyes were currently staring at a pair of phoenix-tail butterfly shrimp. Hearing Gu Juji's words, she laughed out with a poof. Although didn't say anything, the smiling expression in her eyes, everyone all understood. Turns out she wasn't really of Gu Huaijiang's blood. Everyone all couldn't help feeling somewhat disappointed. Gu Huaijiang glanced at Yu Fu. He originally wanted to give everyone a misconception, letting them feel that Yu Fu was his illegitimate daughter. After all, a non-blood-related foster daughter and an actually blood-related foster daughter were worlds apart. He didn't want others to slight Yu Fu because of this. Gu Huaijiang swept a glance at everyone, his gaze turning solemn. Yu Fu, although isn't of my blood, she is still my lifesaver. She is the god of medicine Sun Qi's disciple. This time at the borders, during a battle with Western Kuan, I got struck with a poison arrow. It was Yu Fu who saved my life. Although there is no blood relations, but if I'm to find out that you all don't treat her as a younger sister because of this, I absolutely won't forgive easily. Read latest chapters at Wuxia World. EU. Everyone quickly lowered their heads, responded with yes. The smile on Gu Juji's face grew stronger and glanced towards Gu Xiang and Gu Yi, seeing them both in high spirits too. Actually, Yu Fu not being their actual biological younger sister seemed a little more fun. T/N. I'm actually not sure how the release schedule for this is going to go. It's most likely going to be sporadic at the moment, but I don't plan on abandoning it. After dinner, Yu Fu returned to the western wing, sitting cross-legged together with Lan Yao on the coach, whispering to one another. After dinner, Yu Fu returned to the western wing, sitting cross-legged together with Lan Yao on the coach, whispering to one another. Princess, Prink, sh. What princess? No princess. This place is Eastern Ling. You better not shout the wrong things. Yu Fu hurriedly interrupted Lan Yao's words, stretching out her little head to look outside. Fortunately, Qi Ting said she was going to draw hot water for her bath and still haven't returned yet. Lan Yao lowered her head and let out an "oh." Her round little face was very serious. Then Prin. Miss, why did you follow Marquis Gu to the imperial capital then? The medicine god just wanted to let you head to the farming village at the foot of the mountain to hide for 10 days to half a month. Once those scouts that came leave, you can return to the valley. Who knew that you'd actually get taken away by the Eastern Ling soldiers? After the medicine god heard, he was very angry. Using the word angry completely wasn't enough to describe Sun Qi's fury. At the time, he was clearly grinding his teeth and stamping his foot, nearly ruining his own white gown and long sleeves, and afterwards pointed to the heavens and swore to the sun, saying he was going to poison that bunch of blind Eastern Ling soldiers to death. T/N. Just imagine Sun Qi as a salty and doting grandpa to Yu Fu. I think it's rumored that he's older than the grandfather of the current emperor, so an ancient fossil. He'd secretly sent people to come get Yu Fu, but Yu Fu instead said she temporarily won't go back and wanted to be Gu Huaijiang's daughter, taking a trip to Eastern Ling's imperial capital. After Sun Qi heard this news, he cried like he was mourning for his deceased parents, and after he finished crying, he hastily had Yao Lan sent to Eastern Ling. He knew Yu Fu didn't have the ability to take care of herself, so when she left the valley, he'd specially told her to take along many gold and silver. That way, her days will be a little better. Yu Fu stuck out her tongue. It's still not safe at the foot of the mountain. Those people have been investigating for this many years, yet wasn't able to get any results. This time, they definitely won't give up easily. I don't want to involve Master, so it's best to hide far, far away. Yao Lan nodded her head, half understanding. So when Marquis Gu wanted to let people assume you're his illegitimate daughter, you deliberately objected. Also because you're afraid of involving Marquis Gu? Yu Fu originally was playing with her little pigtails by her ears. Hearing these words, she turned her head and earnestly used her eyes to point to the decorations in the western wing. Look at how good the great general treats me. Although he's repaying me for saving his life, I'm still unwilling to involve him, so it's best to draw the lines clearly. Besides, even if she didn't have the identity of Gu Huaijiang's illegitimate daughter, just based on those treasures and valuables she brought out from Immortal's Valley, it was still more than enough for her to live her days. Yao Lan somewhat heart-achingly looked to Yu Fu. She was still really young and her birth was noble, yet she understood how to think for others. Really hard for one to not like her. She suddenly smiled and took off her outer coat. Miss, don't worry if you don't have enough. I still have more here. She removed her outer coat and shook it. The silver and gold ingots rolled out from the pockets and filled the couch, making Yu Fu dumbstruck at the sight. This much? Could this also be? Yao Lan firmly nodded. Aside from the medicine god Sun Qi, who else would be this high-handed, daring to stuff two little girls full of gold and silver? Miss, time to wash up. Qi Ting just happened to walk in at this time. She carried a large basin in her hands, and rolling hot steam emitted from the basin. Upon seeing Yao Lan and Yu Fu sitting together on the couch, displeasure appeared in her eyes. A girl from the wilderness actually daring to sit together with the master on the couch, really lacking in manners. So what if she was a veteran servant by Yu Fu's side? Based on background and seniority, she, Qi Ting, was the first-ranked servant girl of Western Wing. All right. Others all needed to stand back. Yao Lan, since you've come to our Marquis Manor as a servant, then you should abide by our Marquis Manor's rules. Our rules here are different from that Something Valley. Servant girls can't sit on the couch together with their master. Do you understand? Qi Ting wrung the handkerchief from the basin and handed it to Yu Fu, as she casted sidelong glances at Yao Lan, her tone high and condescending. Yu Fu placed the handkerchief to her face, but feeling it slightly scalding, she thus brought it down. Big Sister Qi, Yao Lan only serves in my room. It's fine as long as her etiquette is good outside. It doesn't need to be that uptight here at my place. Not just Yao Lan, but Big Sister Yu too. Yu Fu persuaded with a smile, then placed the handkerchief to her face again. She grew up in the Immortals Valley since she was small, and didn't pay close attention to rules. Towards Yao Lan, she didn't regard her as a servant either, but rather like a friend, playing together and studying together. Towards Qi Ting, she also expressed this kindness, but the latter rather didn't feel grateful, and even began lecturing Yu Fu. Miss Yu Fu, you grew up in the wilderness since small, and also isn't of our Marquis' bloodline. Presumably no one has taught you rules before, right? No worries. Right now, Marquis has taken you in to be his daughter, and has also let me come serve you. I will slowly teach you the rules. Yao Lan naturally also have to abide by these rules too. The tone she spoke in was no longer that respectful as before. Yao Lan heard the thorns in her words and discontentedly retorted, "What are you saying? Are you criticizing our Miss is a mannerless countryside peasant? Don't you know Miss is?" She couldn't expose Yu Fu's true identity. She was so angry she couldn't continue speaking. Yet Qi Ting became increasingly smug. Wasn't she merely some medicine god's disciple? What's so great about that? In front of the imperial capital's one and only Marquis Manor, she was still just a countryside girl. How could I dare criticize Miss? Miss is Miss after all. I'm saying you lack manners. In the future, you can't be this wanton. Qi Ting smugly lifted her chin. My father is someone in charge of the manor, and my grandfather is an old steward who's served in the manor for decades. The rules in the manor, I understand better than anyone, so in the future, I will properly teach you and also Miss Yu Fu. She impatiently showed off her own status, wanting to let Yu Fu become aware of her special status. After all, how much Gu Huaijiang respects Qian, this old steward, Fu Yu saw with her own eyes, so she should know her place. Before Yu Fu could say anything, she suddenly heard outside the door a man's mocking voice sounding. Since you understand the rules of the manor the most, then why don't you tell me? Showing off own status in front of the master is which rule? Qi Ting turned to look, seeing Gu Jiugu walking in, scaring her to hurriedly kneel. Yu Fu saw him wearing a loose spring garments, his head of beautiful hair casually tied up, appearing like he'd just finished bathing, carrying himself in a languid manner. A pair of phoenix eyes narrowed and glanced at the three in the room, smiling but not smiling. As he approached, a wave of faint flower fragrance washed over, precisely the smell of bath beans. Second brother, she properly greeted him, just she still was somewhat not used to the bow for Eastern Ling girls, so she only just straightly stood there, staring back at him with her head tilted. Read latest chapters at Wuxia World. That pair of glistening large eyes made he unable to hold back his smile. Qi Ting kneeled on the ground and hurriedly explained. Second young master misunderstood. This servant wasn't showing off in front of Miss Yu Fu. It's Yao Lan, this girl, that's lacking in manners too much. This servant worried that she might make our marquis manner lose face, thus lectured her. Yao Lan's round face flushed red, like a large apple. She pointed to Qi Ting, "You clearly, seeing that Miss isn't of the great general's bloodline, thus looked down on her. Yet you still don't dare to admit." Chapter 12. The Person Behind the Screen. Chapter 12. The person behind the screen. When Gu Jiugu heard, he laughed with a piff. Yu Fu was interesting. Even this little servant girl by her side was sharp-tongued. Her words drew blood on the first prick. Qi Ting's expression became unsightly. This servant wouldn't dare. This servant really was just lecturing her, that's all, and wouldn't dare to look down on Miss Yu Fu. As she said this, turned towards Yu Fu, asking Miss Yu Fu to say something fair for this servant. If Miss doesn't like the marquis manner rules, then in the future, this servant will just not teach Yao Lan. Yu thought for a moment and nodded towards her before turning to look at Gu Jiugu. Second brother, she'd mostly said it out of kindness. After all, we're on your manor. If others see us being mannerless, what would we do if we embarrassed the great general? Just, in the Western Wing, when there's no outsiders present, there's no need to be this formal. Second brother, what do you think? Gu Jiugu didn't expect that she was this sensible, even considering the marquis manner's face. Since she has the intention to let off Qi Ting, then he'll just give her this face. Did you hear? Just do as Yu Fu says. Steward Qi has served in the manor for decades. Facing old age, he should live in honor. Don't make him lose face, understand? This servant understands. Qi Ting lowered her head, tightly biting her lower lip, resenting in her heart. Relying on her own grandfather's prestige, she has always been pampered in the manor. No one has ever dared to be disrespectful towards her and not praise her beauty. There were no young misses in the manor, so she naturally considered herself to be half a young miss. The masters, seeing on Qian's behalf, never criticized her harshly before either. Who knew that today, having just come to serve, she would get reprimanded by the second young master like this? She couldn't help but secretly resent Yu Fu. There's nothing for you here, you can withdraw. Gu Jiugu had Qi Ting withdraw, yet didn't have any intention of leaving himself. Yao Lan hurriedly poured up a cup of tea. He observed Yao Lan's manners, seeing that although she was young, her movements were very orderly, steady, and meticulous, not like the mannerless countryside girl Qi Ting spoke of. He then saw the ingots of gold and silver rolling on the couch. His brow slightly jumped, finally looking towards Yu Fu. Yu Fu was currently drinking from the teacup, her small face not even as big as the tea lip, smiling as she drank. Taisher cake. I don't like eating cotton candy. Gu Xiang and Gu Yi observed his complexion. This 10,000-year-old ice face, as expected, wasn't called that for nothing. Even when chewing the Taisher cake, his face was expressionless. What kind of look is that? Gu Hanemo suddenly jumped up from his seat. The way Gu Xiang and Gu Yi were staring at him was just like staring at an ignorant bumpkin. Those eyes plainly wrote, "You don't understand Yu Fu's cuteness, so we don't share a common language with you." No insight. No wonder Gu Xiang and Gu Yi were twins, speaking in unison, as they continued using that disdaining gaze to stare at Gu Hanemo. Gu Hanemo finished that piece of Taisher cake and stood up. He couldn't afford to provoke them, but he could afford to avoid them. I'm going to practice the sword. With that said, he expressionlessly walked out of the room. Sword training again. Third brother only knows how to train all day. The twins inwardly mocked, then suddenly seeing there was flaky pastries among the desserts on the table, their eyes lit up. Come on, let's go give this to Yu Fu. Yu Fu liked eating flaky pastry the most. At the same time, bored with nothing to do, Yu Fu left the western wing gates to head to the main courtyard to see Gu Huaijiang. Unexpectedly, after entering the courtyard, she saw everyone all hurrying about, carrying a happy expression on their faces. She randomly pulled a servant boy over to ask, "Miss Yu Fu, the eldest young master has returned, bringing back many local specialties from Jinling. The horse carriage is just outside the gates. We're currently going to move the things." Turns out it was that rumored eldest young master. Yu Fu propped her hand on her little face, inwardly thinking to herself, what kind of person would this eldest son of Gu Huaijiang be like? On the way here, she didn't hear any less praises about him from old Jean and the others, saying how valiant and formidable the young general was, skilled in both the brush and sword, and glowing with vigor. Read latest chapters at Wuxia World. EU from their mouths, Gu Shubai was just like a perfect person. No, perfect was for the gods, not people. Yu Fu pondered as she headed towards the interior of the main courtyard. After passing through the hanging screen, she suddenly saw dense hot steam emitting out from behind a sandalwood screen carved with 4 verses of good fortune. A near-perfect figure stood up from the bathtub behind the screen. The man's naked back exposed completely. Yu Fu was instantly dumbstruck. Chapter 13. Big Brother from Yu Fu's angle. She could only see the man's muscular bare back through the screen cracks. Wide shoulders, narrow waist, delicate and graceful. His spine perfectly straight like an upright pine tree. Like a creator's meticulously carved and delicately cut piece of art. Every inch of muscle was all just perfect, making one want to see the vigorous power contained under that honey-colored skin. Those 2 arms casually scooping up the water, the lines faintly rising, carrying the firmness of a martial artist. The water streamed along the lines of his back, rapidly flowing down and splashing into fine droplets. Yu Fu couldn't help but blankly stare, all the way until the person behind the screen noticed the unfamiliar presence. Instantly, the crashing sound of water echoed. The water droplets penetrated through the cracks in the screen, directly assaulting Yu Fu's face. Yu Fu stretched her hand out and rubbed her face, only feeling that the water droplets splashed on her face also carried a man's unique scent. And the person behind the screen spread his arms in lightning speed, putting on a full silk white middle garment, and walked out from behind the screen. After Yu Fu saw his appearance clearly, she was further dumbstruck to the point that she even forgot to wipe away the water droplets on her face. In this world, there's actually such a beautiful man? The man before her was tall and lofty, his brows like an ink painting, naturally black. A pair of glistening eyes, lustrous and radiant, carrying a slight smile, warmly gazing to her like the spring breeze. His straight nose, his lightly pursed pink lips, and his slightly lowered head made him appear like a high god descending into the mortal realm. "You're little Yu Fu?" His voice was gentle and soft, but deep, rich with magnetism, like a bolt of the finest silk in Jiangnan, making one unable to forget at a touch. Yu Fu slightly parted her lips in astonishment, only staring at him, even forgetting to reply. A good while later, she finally nodded blankly. "I am your big brother?" Gu Huaijiang wanted to let Yu Fu be his adopted daughter, so naturally she was his younger sister. Calling him big brother wasn't inappropriate. Gu Shubai nodded with a smile. His eyes that were bright like the stars glistened in a loving light. Yu Fu was even more smaller than he'd imagined. Originally thinking that a 12-year-old girl should be a bit more taller and a bit more sturdier. But little Yu Fu's 4 limbs were slim, and that slender wrist exposed out from under the pink woven satin spring garment was thinner than the early spring's newly budding willow branch. Standing before him, her little head only reached his waist. "Big brother." Yu Fu smilingly pounced into his arms, giving him a firm hug, not willing to let go for a long while. Gu Shubai was slightly startled. This child sure was lively, but being hugged by her soft body was just like hugging a lump of cloud, making it unbearable for one to push her away. When the servant boy that went to fetch the hot water walked in, he saw Yu Fu spreading out her little arms and legs hugging the tall Gu Shubai, appearing very amusing. He couldn't help but smile, and then hurriedly bowed to Gu Shubai. "Eldest young master, it's all this servant's fault for not watching, letting Miss Yu Fu accidentally intrude this place." "No matter." Yu Fu finally was willing to let go, and then wiped the corners of her mouth, fearing that her drool would leak out. Thank goodness there wasn't any drool. Her first impression in front of Big Brother should still be pretty good. Gu Shubai, however, smilingly wiped her cheeks. "Getting splashed a face full of water. Did you not feel it at all?" His dangling silk white sleeve carried water stains. Yu Fu took a glance, her little face immediately reddening. Shortly after, Gu Jiugu and the others also heard the news, and all came to the main courtyard to see Gu Shubai. He had the local specialties brought back from Jinling distributed to each one. Everybody's presents were all different, yet was also all to everyone's satisfaction. For instance, Gu Jiugu liked drinking wine, so what he got was a jar of Jinling wine. Gu Hanemo was fond of swords, so what he got was a sword cover made with Jinling brocade. Everyone all thanked him one after the other, only seeing Gu Shu by turning to take out a long box and handing it to Yu Fu. Yu Fu lifted her head in surprise, looking to him with widened eyes, her eyelashes blinking. She didn't know that she also had a share. When I was in Jinling, I'd received a letter from the manor, learning that father had brought back a little girl, and thinking that girls all like clothes and accessories, I thus brought you a few bolts of Jinling's embroidered brocade. He reached out and unfastened the copper button. The box opened before everyone. The brocade fabric inside was lustrous and brilliant, beautiful like sunset clouds in the sky. Gu Xiang and Gu Yi let out a gasp in surprise. Eldest brother is really generous. This Jinling brocade is known as an inch of brocade, an inch of gold. Just a small piece is already worth a considerable amount. Eldest brother actually gave Yu Fu several bolts. That sword cover you gave third brother doesn't even use that much material. Gu Huaijiang just happened to walk out from the inner room. Hearing Gu Yi's words, he lightly snorted at once. Our Gu Marquis manor has always been strict in raising sons and pampers daughters. What are you all doing comparing with Yu Fu, a little girl? With that said, he looked towards Gu Shubai. You did really well. These brocades must have cost quite a bit. Steward Qi, go to the storage and retrieve the equivalent amount of money and send it to the heir's room. Gu Shubai hurriedly smiled to stop him. Father, there's no need for such. These expenses, this son is able to bear. His greeting gift to his younger sister. How can he let father reimburse him? Gu Jiugu interrupted with a laugh. Father doesn't need to worry about the money for eldest brother. Eldest brother is the Gu Marquis Manor's heir after all, in addition to strict in raising sons. This much money, he's still able to afford. The crowd joked and laughed around. Yu Fu lightly stroked the brocade in the box, smiling both tenderly and sweetly. Thank you, big brother. Gu Jiugu keenly raised his brow. Second brother, third brother, fourth brother, Yu Fu has always addressed them as such. How come when it came to Gu Shubai, it became big brother? T/N, by her usual pattern, she's supposed to call him eldest brother, but instead calls him Degij, which is big brother, a more intimate address. The crowd, however, didn't pay attention to this nuance, each sitting down, listening to Gu Shubai recount some news from Jinling. Eldest paternal aunt's birthday banquet was very lively. Not only the local officials of Jinling all attended, even quite a few people from the capital painstakingly ran to Jinling to congratulate her. Yu Fu had only heard about this eldest paternal aunt from the various brothers' mouth, yet didn't know who she was. She tilted her head with a puzzled look on her face. Read latest chapters at Wuxia World. Gu Shubai saw her expression and explained with a smile. This eldest paternal aunt is father's eldest sister, and had married to Jinling's Su family. This year was her 50th birthday, but father was on the battlefield at the borders, thus I went in his place to go congratulate. Listening to his tone when he spoke of this eldest paternal aunt, it seemed she was very revered. Presumably, this eldest sister, to Gu Huaijiang, possessed an unique significance. Gui instinctively let out a sneer. That Su eldest miss of eldest paternal aunt's family. Has her temper improved some nowadays? Chapter 14. Only accepting toys as gift. The news of Gu Shu by spending huge amount of gold buying a few bolts of brocade in Jinling, for some reason, spread all over the imperial capital. Rather, they weren't surprised at his valiance in throwing 1,000 pieces of gold in one go. The heir of the Gu Marquis Manor spending thousands of taels of gold to buy something wasn't something worth mentioning. What was worth mentioning was that reportedly, he bought those brocade for his younger sister to make new clothes. Ever since Marquis Gu lost his wife 16 years ago, he never remarried nor had any concubines, So where did this younger sister come from? In an instant, Yu Fu's appearance became the imperial capital's hottest topic of conversation. Some who were partially informed divulged bits of information, and some who had rich imaginations added oil and vinegar to the story. Thus Yu Fu's identity had a definitive answer. She was born from Marquis Gu's outside mistress kept at the borders, his illegitimate daughter. Turns out Marquis Gu wasn't deeply devoted to his deceased wife, and wasn't preserving his body, unwilling to take a concubine, but rather, he'd long had a mistress outside. Heard that this young miss from this outside mistress was already 12 years old. The officials that were well-informed had long prepared presents, practically about to stampede through the Marquis Manor's doorsteps, eagerly wanting to let their presence be favored. One has to know, Marquis Gu was infamous for not accepting gifts and not joining factions. Under his military orders are like mountains type of education. The young masters of the Marquis Gu Manor also were the same as him, never accepting the officials' tributes. However, whether he accepted or not was one thing, and whether they sent or not was a separate thing. The officials crouching before the Marquis Gu Manor gates felt a stroke of good luck. Heard Marquis Gu very much adores this youngest daughter. Perhaps this time, he'll make an exception and accept the gifts? The things they prepared weren't anything too valuable either. All were just clothes, accessories, and ornaments that young ladies liked. From the gates, a middle-aged man that looked like a steward straightly marched out carrying a polite smile on his face. Everyone. Our Marquis has ordered me to thank everyone for the gifts. As soon as they heard Qi Zhou's perfunctory-like words, the crowd only felt as if their ears had grown calluses. Every time they came to deliver gifts, Qi Zhou always replied like this. The Marquis said, "Anything too valuable can't be accepted, but if there are some interesting playthings, this one can deliver to our Miss Yu Fu." Hearing these words, the crowd's eyes lit up, and in their hearts, ignited a flame of hope. There is. Look at this exquisite white jade dice of mine. Miss will definitely like it. Mine too. This cornelian phoenix tail shuttlecock of mine is precisely what young ladies love to play with. This of mine is also interesting. Yu Fu was currently sitting under the Western Wing's back veranda eating Eastern Ling's specialty desserts, while also watching the spring water in the back noisily bubbling. She felt it was very interesting. As she watched, her two lotus root-like legs swayed back and forth in the air. This vein of spring water was clear and lively, always reminding her of the little streams in the Immortals Valley. In the summer, she often paddled in the waters together with Yao Lan barefoot. She somewhat missed her Shifu. "Miss, a lot of presents were sent in from outside. Do you want to go see?" Qi Ting walked out from inside the room. Ever since she got reprimanded by Gu Jiugu last time, she became much more behaved. Just occasionally when seeing Yao Lan and Yu Fu being overly intimate, she still couldn't help but inwardly roll her eyes. Nothing more than a wild miss from don't know where. She definitely didn't care to get close to. As long as she can smoothly stay in the Western Wing, then no need to worry about the young masters of the manor not being able to see her, and when the time comes, based on her position in the manor, she definitely will be able to successfully marry one of the young masters. Yu Fu seemingly didn't notice her intentions, instead just turning her head to look at her. "What presents? Is it from the great general again?" These days, Gu Huaijiang frequently sent things to the Western Wing. There was food, clothes, and also toys. Gu Shubai and them also didn't slack, as they competed in sending things to the Western Wing. Everything that Yu Fu could use, they've practically all sent. This made Qi Ting very discontent. It's not like she was their actual younger sister. Don't know what the young masters were pampering her that much for. No, it's from the officials outside. Those officials all think that Mrs. Marquis Gu's illegitimate daughter, thus all thought of ways to send presents to curry favor. Her underlying meaning was that Yu Fu was completely just a fox exploiting the tiger's might, thus able to receive these officials' gifts. As Qi Ting spoke, she secretly glanced at Yu Fu's face, but didn't see anything particular. She thus felt much more relieved. Yu Fu was still young, and didn't understand the mockery in her words. So it's like that. Since they've sent them, then I'll go have a look. Despite her hands practically going limp from receiving presents lately, Yu Fu was still just a little girl after all. Hearing there were presents, she still can't help but feel delighted. The one that delivered the presents was Qizhou. Seeing Yu Fu, he bowed to her with a smile, and then ordered the servants to have the presents brought up. After seeing the presents, Yu Fu let out a wah in exclamation. In the hands of 7-8 servant boys were all presents, brimming to the edge, making one worry that the presents might fall to the ground at any time. However, her worries were excessive. The servants of Marquis Gu Manor were all well trained, and very quickly had all the presents orderly arranged by categorizes, piling into a small mountain on the table. Uncle Qi, are these presents all for me? Getting called uncle by her, Qizhou instinctively blanked. After returning to his senses, he felt as if honey melted in his heart, the sweetness seeping into the bottom of his heart. His smile also unconsciously became much more gentle. Yes, Miss Yu Fu. Just keep anything you like, and if there's anything you don't like, just let Qi Ting come tell me. I'll come and have them taken care of. When Qizhou said taken care of, it was just like saying he was taking care of trash and whatnot. Yu Fu couldn't help but giggle, inwardly thinking, the Gu Manor style really was honest. Even Qizhou, a steward, all had that bit of a clean and honest character. His father Qian, head steward Qi, was also a loyal and devoted old servant, the family's upbringing very excellent. Unfortunately, Yu Fu's dark pupils turned as she pursed her lips, ultimately not voicing the words in her heart. Unfortunately, Qi Ting didn't inherit her grandfather and father's steadiness and loyalty, instead having an extra trace of frivolousness from being raised pampered. Seeing her not saying anything, Qizhou respectfully continued, Actually, I came today for one more thing. It's to bring Steward Li's wife to come meet Miss Yu Fu. Read latest chapters at Wuxia World. EU Steward Li's wife? Yu Fu tilted her head and looked behind Qizhou. Sure enough, she saw an elderly woman. She had a medium figure, with her hair combed in a clean and tidy married woman style, and carried a smile on her face. Seeing Yu Fu gazing at her, she thus walked forward and graciously performed a formal curtsy. Greetings, Miss Yu Fu. Chapter 15. Western Wing's new people. Just now, when Qizhou introduced her, he said she was Steward Li's wife. Yu Fu knew, in the manor, aside from Qian, this head steward, there were 10 to 20 other stewards, separately in charge of the matters in various places. For example, Qizhou was also one of them. However, he was Qian's son. So Gu Huaijiang had the intention of letting him take Qian's place and become the head steward of the manor. That's why the things Qizhou were in charge of was comparatively more than the others, and was also a little more dignified than the others as well. Since she was the wife of a steward, then presumably she too had some face in the manor. Yu Fu thought for a moment and then personally went forward to help her up. Aunt Li, no need to be this formal. Quickly get up. When she heard the words Aunt Li, the delight on her face nearly overflowed, as she looked to the little Yu Fu before her with affection. Seeing her looking like delicately carved jade, and the radiance in her eyes both playful and witty, she became ever more fond of her. Miss Yu Fu, are you comfortable in the Western Wing? Because there's 2 little people here serving you? Steward Qi had me come take care of Miss, and also bring a few more servant girls and servant women over for Miss to pick out. Aunt Li gave a meaningful glance towards the door, and the crowd walked in a line. Separately, it was 4 servant girls in front, and 4 servant women in the back. There were also 10 some rough labor servant girls and servant women waiting under veranda that didn't come in. Miss, have a look. Are these servant girls and servant women usable? Hearing the words, have a look, everyone all lifted their heads, revealing their most appropriate smile, seemingly as if they were afraid Yu Fu won't take a fancy to them and have the return back. Yu Fu, however, didn't look too much, just smilingly looked to Aunt Li. Steward Qi was sent by the great general, and Aunt Li was someone personally picked by Steward Qi. Then the people you picked definitely won't be bad, so there's no need for me to look. The joy in the corner of Aunt Li's eyes momentarily couldn't be concealed anymore. She looked to Yu Fu's tender little cheeks, practically hating that she can't give it a pinch. In this world, how is there such a smooth-talking little miss? Her words not only praised Aunt Li, it even praised Qizhou, who was present, as well as all 8 servant girls and servant women. How could one not like her? Aunt Li had always believed herself to be someone who has long experiences in social relations, But unexpectedly in the first sight of meeting Yu Fu, she'd already fallen into enemy hands. No wonder the Marquis and the young masters all pampered her that much. Yes, then we'll just go according to Miss's intention and have them all stay. Let me introduce them to Miss. This is Qian Mama. This is... Seeing Aunt Li getting along very well with Yu Fu, Qi Zhou thus silently withdrew. After he left, Yu Fu sized up the 4 servant girls. The 2 in front were a little older, approximately 15-16 years old, about the same as Qi Ting. The 2 in the back were slightly younger, also about 13-14 years old. You're called Lian Zhu, and you're called Lian Bai? The 2 servant girls in front that were called out by Yu Fu curtsied with a cheerful expression on their face. It is precisely this servant. Yu Fu held one in each hand, helping them get up. She looked to Lian Zhu's slightly plump figure and her smooth and round face. Big sister Lian Zhu appears round like pearl and sleek like jade, just like a top-quality southern sea pearl. Calling you Lian Zhu is perfect. T/N. The Zhu in Lian Zhu's name means pearl. Then, she looked towards Lian Bai. Her figure was slim, and she was also slightly taller than the average girl. Big sister Lian Bai's figure is slender, just like an upright jade bamboo. Calling you Lian Bai also can't be more fitting. T/N. The Bai in Lian Bai's name means green jade. As for the 2 little servant girls in the back, the one called Yin Ling, Silver Bell, her voice was crisp and clear, perfectly matching the sound of a silver bell. And the one called Yin Shui, Silver Snow, her skin was snow white, very much matching her name too. Yu Fu had the 4 all looked over, their names and characteristics matching perfectly. She instantly had them all memorized. The 4 all felt strangely happy after getting looked over by her. The words of praise from her mouth really made one respect her from the bottom of their hearts. Such a young age, yet already treats people this generously, making it difficult to not like her. Aunt Li smilingly said, "It's good that Miss likes. It's good that Miss likes." Yu Fu had Yao Lan and Qi Ting called over too, letting them meet with Aunt Li as well as the other 4. Aunt Li, this is Yao Lan, who has served by my side ever since I was little. When I was at the Immortals Valley, it was her that took care of me. Although she is young, but don't worry, she understands the rules. Yu Fu said with a serious expression, fearing that Aunt Li will be like Qi Ting, insisting on teaching Yao Lan rules. Aunt Li's heart was already stolen away by Yu Fu, so how could she still say any words of objection, repeatedly nodding her head as she listened. I'm not worried. Having been trained by Mrs. Side since childhood, even if her age is small, she certainly must be a sensible good girl, just like Miss. With that said, she turned around and said to Lian Zhu and them, Miss Yao Lan's age is the smallest, but she's already taken care of Miss for many years. Based on seniority, she's a senior to you all. You all better not bully her because of her age. If I hear of it, I won't let you all off easily. Everyone answered in unison. Yu Fu gratefully glanced to Aunt Li, and even Yao Lan's impression of Aunt Li increased by a lot. Looks like the servants of the Gu Manor weren't really all the same as Qi Ting, frivolous and rude. Qi Ting rather arrogantly walked over, her gaze bluntly sweeping over the 4 servant girls. Seeing that Lian Zhu was smooth and beautiful, seemingly even prettier than herself, she immediately became unhappy. Aunt Li has been in the manor for a long time, so naturally she recognized Qi Ting. Normally, seeing on behalf of Qian and Qi Zhou, she didn't look after her any less either. Qi Ting, you're the oldest here, and also the first to come serve at Mrs. Side. In the future, you'll need to look after the others a little. Don't worry, Aunt Li. After receiving these words, Qi Ting produced a mischievous thought inside, feeling as if she herself had instantly gotten a few more people to serve her, increasingly showing off her authority as she glanced to them. Lian Zhu and the others were also all houseborn servants, also having grown up in the manor, just their parents weren't as respected as Qi Ting's. Right now, everyone was serving Miss together in the western wing. So who was more noble than who? Qi Ting's gaze and demeanor made the 4 of them all feel uncomfortable inside, yet on their face, they didn't dare show it. Aunt Li swept a glance at the 4 of them, carrying a slight smile on her face, unknown as to what she was thinking. After a while, she turned to Yu Fu. Miss most likely has also figured it out. In our Eastern Ling's noble manners, there's an unwritten rule. The servant girls' names are all matched in pairs. Lian Zhu and Lian Bai are a pair, and Yin Ling and Yin Shui are a pair. Just Qi Ting and Miss Yao Lan. As soon as Qi Ting heard these words, she immediately wanted to rebuke, but Yu Fu stealthily beat her to it, still with a childish tone. Aunt Li, Yao Lan's name. I've called for 7 to 8 years already. If she were to suddenly change her name into something else, then I won't be used to it. Qi Ting's mind sounded in a bang. Yao Lan can't change her name. Then that means she'll have to change her name to match Yao Lan's? How can that be? How can she change her name to follow a feral girl's? This definitely won't do. Read latest chapters at Wuxia World. Aunt Li looked upon Yu Fu's gaze. In those eyes, aside from childishness, there was also clear firmness. She instantly understood and smilingly looked to Qi Ting. Qi Ting, in the past, you were Steward Qi's daughter, and wasn't considered a proper servant girl in the manor. But now that you're a servant girl in Mrs. Place, you should have a servant girl's name. Lian Zhu and Lian Bai's names were also given to them by me just now. Saying to hear, Aunt Li couldn't help feeling somewhat pleased with herself. These 4 names she came up with were all praised by Yu Fu just now. Sure enough, Aunt Li wanted to have Qi Ting's name changed, thus she became a little unhappy. She knew that this Aunt Li, while appearing quite warm and kind, was actually very stubborn and resolute in her actions. It was because of this that Qi Zhou would choose her to handle the matters in the Western Wing. Arguing with this Aunt Li was likely futile. She could only turn her attention to Yu Fu. Young Miss Yu Fu, this servant has grown up with this name. My grandfather and father both have the surname Qi, and they are both stewards in this manor. Could you be a little accommodating? Upon hearing these words, Aunt Li immediately became unhappy. Even Lian Zhu's group of 4 could not help but pout. But showing consideration to Qian, they could not say anything about Qi Ting. They could only watch to see how Yu Fu would rule on this matter. She was young and had a gentle disposition, but it would be best if she was not swayed by Qi Ting. Everyone's eyes were focused on Yu Fu, but she was not someone who could be easily manipulated. She had her own scales to determine right and wrong. They saw her look at her sincerely with her large, bright eyes. Sister Qi, I understand that you were reluctant to part with your name, but even Sister Lian Zhu and the others have changed their names. If you're the only one to not change, that would be too unfair to the others. The rules of this manor would also end up being ignored. Sister Qi, what do you think? Normally, it was Qi Ting who would frequently speak about order and rules, as she would say that Yao Lan did not follow the rules and that she was a naughty girl. Today, she herself had been lectured by Yu Fu about the rules. As a result, she was left speechless. After Yu Fu finished speaking, she turned around and said to Aunt Li, for the sake of fairness, I should have allowed you to also change Yao Lan's name, but her name was given by an elder, my master. If it was changed, it truly would be unfair to my old master. She slightly bit on her pink lips and observed Lian Zhu's group with a hint of guilt. She felt that she had still caused a small amount of unfairness. Aunt Li saw her expression and was about to console her, but Lian Zhu's group was first to speak. Young miss, don't say that. This is very fair. Sister Yao Lan has been with young miss since childhood. Young miss has grown accustomed to it, so why change it? We had our names changed in pairs, and it was for the sake of making things easier for young miss. What does everyone else think? Lian Bai and Lian Meng were in agreement, as Yin Ling and Yin Shui copied them. They all expressed that this was the case. Aunt Li looked at the 4 servants that she had chosen and could not help but nod to show her approval. She felt that she really had keen eyes. These 4 servants really were understanding. It was just this Qi Ting. Aunt Li did not want to waste any words on her and directly said, then from this day forward, Qi Ting will have her name changed to Yao Hong. This name is pretty and will form a pair with Yao Lan. Sister Yao Hong. Lian Zhu's group promptly set to calling her this while nodding toward her in acknowledgement. Qi Ting's expression, however, made it look as if she had a fly in her mouth that she could neither swallow nor spit out. With these servants as companions, Yu Fu was quite happy. She had plenty of things to talk about with them. Watching from the side, Gu Xiang and Gui had fooled around so much that they could no longer play together as much. The two were quite annoyed. To try and scare Yu Fu, they teased her by saying that they would take in Lian Zhu and the others to serve them. Though Yu Fu was still young, this was not enough to startle her. Sister Lian Zhu is best at brushing hair. Look at how she did my hair, and how pretty it is. What do you want Sister Lian Zhu for? Do you also want this sort of hairstyle? Yu Fu's words caused Lian Zhu's group to giggle. Gui was left even more speechless. Qi Ting, however, was able to gain a bit of insight from this little joke. The next time a young man came to visit this manor, she would get close to them to serve tea. She would serve them attentively and hope that they would say something similar about wanting to take her in to serve them. Ever since Lian Zhu's group had come, Yu Fu very rarely made use of Qi Ting. The reason was very simple. Lian Zhu was better than her at styling her hair. Lian Bai was better at making desserts than her. In Lian was better at telling jokes, and In Shui was more attentive. They had all received training in the manor from a young age. Although the manor had not made use of servants in the past 10 years, they had not forgotten about their duty. Only Qi Ting had been spoiled rotten. Unable to thread a needle or even use one, she had no strengths. She was also happy with this idle lifestyle, spending her days in the western wing directing things here and there. She herself acted like a young miss, being just as lazy and unwilling to work. She would only get close whenever young men came around. After this happened a few times, her intentions became known by all. Yao Hong, you can go. There's no need to serve us here. Gu Shubai had come by one day for some tea and noticed Qi Ting hanging around him. There was also a pungent smell coming from her body, and he felt very uncomfortable. He had become accustomed to the life of training in the military and did not like the fragrances that came from female bodies, much less the pungent ones. Qi Ting, however, was not the slightest bit attentive, as she stepped forward to serve tea to Gu Shubai. They only just arrived and do not know how to serve. Eldest Sir should continue to allow this servant to serve here. The act of serving the tea brought her a little too close to him, and his handsome facial features bunched up a little. Raising his hand, he covered his nose and mouth. Yu Fu could see where the problem lay and hurriedly said, Sister Yao Hong, 5th and 6th brother forgot their fans here yesterday. Go and send them back to them. Qi Ting unhappily straightened up. Gu Xiang and Gu Yi were in no rush to use their fans. Could they not just want to retrieve them when they came to visit? This would end up wasting her chance to make an appearance in front of this young man. Though this was what she thought, she did not dare let any of this show in front of Gu Shubai. She could only respectfully comply and head towards Gu Xiang and Gu Yi's courtyards with their fans. Seeing her depart, Yu Fu playfully stuck out her tongue at Gu Shubai. The latter gently tapped the top of her head. You really are a sly spirit. She was a well-loved sly spirit. Not only had she meticulously resolved his problem, but she had also employed a method that would leave nobody feeling awkward to resolve said problem. Yu Fu suddenly remembered something and asked Gu Shubai, why is it that everyone from eldest brother to 4th brother has 2 characters for their names, but 5th and 6th brothers only have one? With a thin smile and eyes that twinkled like stars, Gu Shubai flashed a look of ridicule. He wanted to tease Yu Fu a little. Take a guess, why was it? Yu Fu extended her arm. Because it was gradually getting warmer, she was only wearing a bright red garment with golden oranges and green leaves embroidered on it. This gave her appear even more adorable and lively. Resting her cheek on one hand, a bit of her pure white wrist was exposed. That combined with her face made for quite a pleasant sight. My guess, is that the head general has too many sons and got tired of coming up with names, thus he casually decided to just choose one by the end. Little Yu Fu, are you saying bad things about us behind our backs again? The sound of Gu Xiang and Gu Yi's voices suddenly came from outside the room. Yu Fu was given a start, and she quickly looked toward Gu Shubai in shock. The latter revealed a smile. His handsome smile curved to form an arc resembling that of a new moon. Eldest brother is mean. You already knew that 5th and 6th brother had come and deliberately told me to guess. Gu Shubai knew very well that, given how Yu Fu, Gu Xiang, and Gu Yi fooled around, some inflammatory remark would definitely be said. Who knew that it would be as hilarious as what she actually said? Gu Xiang pinched Yu Fu's cheeks, but did so very carefully for fear of causing her any pain. If it wasn't for you thinking such a thing, eldest brother would not have let you say it. It's clear that you're looking down on us. Though Gu Xiang was saying some sullen stuff, he was smiling quite radiantly. Yu Fu's little face was very springy and soft. It could be said to be perfectly described as very fragile. Ouch, ouch, ouch. Yu Fu grimaced, and her large, dark eyes fluttered. Tears seemed to be on the verge of spilling out. Gu Xiang hastily let go. Sure enough, a red print had been left on Yu Fu's little pink face. Gu Shubai and Gu Yi cast murderous glances in his direction. I didn't put in any strength. It's little Yu Fu's skin that was too tender. Gu Xiang had a look of having been wrongly accused. He wanted to help Yu Fu rub her face, but the little girl had already been pulled away by Gu Shubai. Don't move. I'll rub it for you. Yu Fu obediently stayed in his embrace, and her red face slowly began to recover. Seeing Gu Shubai gently rub her face with his finger, Gui could not be any more envious. He also really wanted to help rub Yu Fu's face. The servants stood to the side and watched the siblings fool around. They could not stop themselves from smiling. Qi Ting was the only one to feel very displeased from seeing Yu Fu be shown so much favor. She was on her way with the fans when she saw Gu Xiang and Gui walking over. In her heart, she had rejoiced that she would be able to be with all three young men at the same time. But the three were only willing to look at Yu Fu. Father, there have been quite a few rumors regarding Yu Fu in the capital recently. Has father heard anything? In the study in the outer yard, Gu Shubai reported some of the happenings in the military to Gu Huaijiang and also brought up Yu Fu. Gu Huaijiang muttered to himself for a moment. He knew that the slightest sign of anything from the Marquis Gu's manor would become a topic of discussion for the people in the capital. That was even without someone like Yu Fu. A large tree will deal with more wind. Our Marquis Gu's manor is very wealthy and must act a little more subtly. I have not yet reported the matter of Guer being shot by a poisoned arrow by someone from Shikuan. The matter of Yu Fu, there's no need for anyone else to know too much. Gu Shubai understood what he intended, but he had a different point of view when it came to Yu Fu's matter. Sun figured that there would be more and more speculation on the outside if Yu Fu's identity was not made public. Since outsiders already know about Yu Fu, why not let her make another public appearance? Leave them with nothing to speculate about. It will also allow Yu Fu to go out in the future without needing to worry about being troubled by others. What he had said was reasonable. An adorable and spirited young girl like Yu Fu would definitely attract attention. They might as well announce her identity to the public and use the Marquis Gu's manor's name to awe the people. Gu Huaijiang looked up at him and said, "Then what do you feel would be a good opportunity to have Yu Fu make an appearance? The Dragon Boat Festival is almost upon us. Based on our capital's customs, most of the noble families will need to host a banquet. Our Marquis Gu's manor has never participated in this before. However, we can go along with the custom this year and host one to allow Yu Fu to officially make an appearance. This is good. Then you will be the one to handle hosting this banquet. I will go and spread word of this in court. Thinking about it, there will be quite a few who will want to come to this banquet." Gu Huaijiang spoke very earnestly, but this caused Gu Shubai to laugh in secret. If people found out that the Marquis Gu's manor was hosting a banquet, it was likely that there would be more than enough people to completely flatten their doorsill. Could it even be described as not a small number? In the blink of an eye, the Dragon Boat Festival had arrived. On the day before first day, Yu Fu learned about the customs of the festival from Antli. In Eastern Ling, the Dragon Boat Festival is a very important day. It's a day that will drive away bad luck. Not only do we need to hang wormwood and calamus on our doors, but we also need to eat zongzi and realgar wine, and wear perfume pouches. Zongzi? Yu Fu had clearly eaten zongzi before. When this was brought up, she could not stop herself from swallowing some saliva. Antli burst into laughter from seeing her gluttonous appearance. That's right. Does young miss like eating zongzi? The manor will be hosting a banquet tomorrow, and will be taking care of many guests. Lord Marquis specifically arranged for young miss to be brought to the front hall to see the guests. Will young miss be nervous? Nervous? Yu Fu had not yet returned from daydreaming about zongzi, yet Antli had already brought up some serious matters. She subconsciously shook her head. Aren't they all high-ranking officials? To be able to come to the Marquis manor as a guest, even if they are not the great general's friends, they will be part of the same faction in court. I'm not nervous. Although she had grown up in the Immortals Valley, It was not as though she had never seen any officials. She had even seen many more magnificent things before. Aunt Lee rejoiced upon hearing this. In her mind, she considered that tomorrow would be Yu Fu's public debut. She would definitely need to dress her up very beautifully. Qi Ting stood to the side and coldly sneered to herself. The Lord Marquis was actually treating a wild girl of unknown background like a proper young miss and was hosting a banquet specifically to introduce her? Bah, was she worthy? She had come up with an idea much earlier. She would make it so that Yu Fu would be unable to see anyone tomorrow. The next morning, Gu Xiang and Gu Yi woke up and ran over to the western wing quite early. They said that they wanted to personally hang the herbs on Yu Fu's door. Aunt Lee, however, stopped them outside of Yu Fu's bedchamber, stopping them from going inside with a smile. Fifth young sir, sixth young sir, the young miss is currently putting on makeup. Do not enter for now. Please have a cup of tea and wait for a while. The two could only sit outside, as Lien Bai came forward to pour them some tea. Gu Xiang and Gu Yi then stared at the table. Ha! Why are there so many perfume pouches? There on the table were 2 platters. On those platters were 5 perfume pouches that exuded a faint scent of wormwood. Lien Bai laughed and said, "These were sent by the Lord Marquis and the other 4 young sirs, thus there are 5. Gu Xiang and Gu Yi exchanged a look. They then looked at the freshly picked wormwood in their hands and suddenly felt as that, by contrast, they looked like beggars. Why did we not think of it? How beautiful would it have been if we had sent perfume pouches? Gu Yi tossed the wormwood in his hand away in disdain, then patted his hands to remove the dust. We wasted our energy. Going out to retrieve wormwood in the morning, this will end with us being laughed at by Yu Fu. I can't even begin to express how much I like the wormwood picked by 5th and 6th brother. How could I laugh at you?" Yu Fu's voice came from the inner room, as a small figure came around the screen and slowly walked over to the two. When Gu Xiang and Gu Yi clearly saw Yu Fu before them, they could not help but let out a sound of approval. Wow! They saw Yu Fu wearing a pink, cloud-patterned brocade dress. The resplendent cloud-patterned brocade had been dyed pink, and its pink clouds were very eye-catching. Her fine and soft hair had been styled into 2 small buns, with 1 on each side. There were all manners of gems in her hair, and little silver bells hung down on both sides. With each step, the little silver bells quietly rang out. They made quite a pleasant sounding. Because she was rather young, Aunt Lee did not have anyone apply makeup on her. Just a touch of red was applied to the center of her forehead. This accentuated her snow-white skin and pink earrings. Gu Xiang and Gu Yi looked at her in a daze. No wonder father wanted a daughter before we were born. It turns out that daughters really are much better looking than sons. Gu Xiang, don't you think so? Gu Yi's words praised Yu Fu, but this ended up offending all 5 of his older brothers and himself. Gu Xiang did not want to admit it, but he could not help but nod. This was because Yu Fu really was too beautiful. Yu Fu looked at their shocked expressions and lowered her head to look down at herself. She was also quite pleased. Raising her head, she smiled at Aunt Lee and the others and said, "This really is quite a beautiful look. Thank you, Auntie. In the future, I will have Sister Lien Zhu take care of my hair." As she happily said this, her head swayed a bit, and the 2 silver bells rang out beautifully. The cuteness was enough to melt their hearts. "Young miss, these perfume pouches were sent by Lord Marquis and the 4 young sirs. Which one will you wear today?" The Dragon Boat Festival required that she wear a perfume pouch. This was something that Aunt Lee had said yesterday, and Yu Fu remembered. She, however, was in no rush to look at the perfume pouches. Instead, she went with Gu Xiang and Gu Yi to hang up the wormwood that the 2 had picked. Only after this did she turn to choose the perfume pouch. Did 3rd brother also send a perfume pouch? Yu Fu hesitantly asked. Who knew why, but Gu Hanemo always had a cold expression. He was unlike his other brothers who frequently came to the western wing to play with her. She always thought that Gu Hanemo disliked her, thus she was a little reluctant to believe that he had also sent her a perfume pouch. Lien Bai said, "That's right. Young miss, look. This black one was sent by the 3rd young sir." Black one? Gu Xiang and Gu Yi looked at the platter. Sure enough, they saw a black perfume pouch with a qilin embroidered on it, and they could not help but burst out laughing. Third brother actually sent a black perfume pouch to Yufu. Ha ha ha, this really suits third brother's personality. He has absolutely no understanding of girls. This sort of color and pattern made it immediately clear that it was for males. How could it be suited to use by a cute girl like Yufu? Yufu was also unable to control the corners of her lips, but she did manage to stop herself from laughing. I am already very happy to have received a perfume pouch from third brother. At the very least, it shows that he doesn't hate me, right? Little Yufu, don't think about it too much. This is just how third brother is. He stays aloof when it comes to all people. He also doesn't like playing with others. Usually, he spends his time training with a sword or training with a sword. To say that he hates you would be wrongly blaming him. Gu Xiang hastily explained to Yufu to try and let her understand that nobody in this manner could possibly hate her. Who could possibly be so blind? Gu Hanemo just never expressed it. In truth, he also treated Yufu the same way he treated his younger brothers. Otherwise, the ice-cold him could not possibly have had someone send her a perfume pouch. When Yufu heard this, she rejoiced and asked Lien Bai, then which one was sent by the general and which one was sent by eldest brother? Lien Bai pointed them out for her. The pink one embroidered with the 5 deadly venoms was sent by Lord Marquis. The pale purple one embroidered with reed patterns was sent by the eldest young sir. Which one does young miss like? Yufu looked between the two and was unable to decide for a while. She had been brought back by the general, and he was the one to give her status. He also allowed her to stay in such a nice place. If she did not wear the one that he sent, he would definitely be heartbroken. But the one sent by eldest brother. Just as she was hesitating, Yao Lan walked up from behind her. It seemed as though she understood what Yufu was thinking and secretly smiled. Young miss, you are already wearing pink clothes. Wearing a pink perfume pouch would not look very good. It would be better to wear this purple one to match, don't you think? Everyone heard this and thought it over carefully. They felt that Yao Lan's words were a little reasonable. Who knew that she would have such good taste at such a young age? It was no wonder Yufu valued her so much. All right, then I'll wear this one. Yufu happily picked up the purple perfume pouch that had been sent by Gu Shubai. Yao Lan carefully placed it on her hip. After it was put on, Yufu happily spun around. Does it look good? Does it look good? She rejoiced so much that it caused Gu Xiang and Gui to feel suspicious. Little Yufu, you clearly just wanted to wear the one that eldest brother sent, right? I could tell. Could it be that you like eldest brother most? There's no such thing. In the end, Yufu was a young girl. After hearing this, her complexion turned bright red and subconsciously refuted it. Gui kept a close eye on her mental state. Then why do you call us 5th bro and 6th bro, but call him eldest brother? With just a few words, the difference in intimacy was instantly exposed. Yufu puffed up her little cheeks, because eldest brother is a bit special. Others call eldest brother the heir, and call you 2 young sirs. Why don't you say anything about that? Despite her young age, she had all kinds of excuses. Gu Xiang and Gu Yi exchanged a glance with the intention of teasing her. Then do tell, aside from this, what else is special about eldest brother? At the very least, 3 other things must be named. Aristocratic families needed to decide on an heir to inherit their position. Gu Huaijiang was originally Eastern Ling's head general. Because of his distinguished military career, he was conferred the title of Marquis, and he became the Marquis General. Given his status as the first son of the first wife, Gu Shubai became the heir. It was what complied with the norms. This was not strange in the slightest. Eldest brother. He is oldest. Yufu felt that what she had said was truly a waste of words. Gu Xiang, however, nodded and laughed, raising his thumb. Good, that's one. What else? Yufu thought for a bit longer. He's the tallest. Gu Shubai was the oldest. This year, he turned 21 years old. It was natural that he would be taller than his younger brothers. Gui puffed out his chest with some dissatisfaction. Wait until I turn 21. I will also be as tall as eldest brother. What's your last one? She needed to come up with one more? Yufu thought for a long time, and her face even turned red from thinking so hard. Everyone looked at her with expectation. In the end, she loudly squeezed out, "Eldest brother looks the best." In an instant, everything went silent. A quiet cough came from outside the door. Yufu turned around and saw Gu Shubai's tall and graceful body there. With a faint smile on his face, he stepped into the room. Yufu's face instantly turned red. Seeing Gu Shubai walk in from the outside, Yufu had a feeling of having been caught doing something bad. Even with the smile lingering on his face, he did not neglect his manners. Yufu suddenly wanted to find a hole to crawl into. "I will go and hang up some wormwood for the general." Immediately after saying this, she ran out of the room, and Yaolan hastily followed her. However, she was stopped in the hall by Qi Ting. "You aren't familiar with the paths in the manor. I will go and chase the young miss." After saying this, she began to run after Yufu. Yaolan thought for a bit and considered that she really did not know the way, thus she could only let Qi Ting go. Ha ha ha. Gu Xiang and Gu Yi could not hold back their laughter. Gu Shubai glanced over, and the smile on his face did change. However, it was enough to scare the two into no longer laughing. In this family, the one that they feared the most was Gu Huaijiang. The one that they feared the second most was not the cold-faced Gu Hanamo. Instead, it was this eldest brother, Gu Shubai. He very rarely got mad at others, but his younger brothers would unconsciously rely on him, would revere him, and would be too afraid to act impudently in front of him. "You two clearly heard that I had arrived, and that prompted you to push her to say those things, isn't that right?" Marquis Gu's manor was a military family, and all 6 of Gu Huaijiang's sons were amongst the best in martial arts. Recognizing people based on sounds was the most basic of techniques. This being the case, Gu Xiang and Gu Yi already knew that Gu Shubai had come. "Eldest brother, don't pretend. You're really quite happy to hear little Yufu praise you for looking good." Gu Yi was the boldest. After enduring for a moment, he still said what he wanted to say with a bit of a smirk. Even little Yufu paid this much attention to appearances and would actually like whichever brother looked the best. Would this world leave anyone with any way forward? Gu Xiang, say, let's give up on this and no longer play with little Yufu. No matter how good of an impression we leave on her, it can't change the fact that we are the ugliest of our brothers. Gu Xiang nearly spat out a mouthful of tea as he pushed Gu Yi to the side. "If you want to talk, speak for yourself. You're the ugly one." "I'm not ugly. In our family, eldest brother has the best looks, and I have nothing to say about that. Second brother was born with looks that girls like, but I'm not too different. In a couple years, when I have grown taller, I definitely won't be lacking compared to second brother." "Gu Xiang, I think you have too much confidence." The topic had instantly been changed. Gu Xiang and Gu Yi were twins, yet they were actually discussing the matter of who was ugly. Gu Shubai looked at their nearly identical faces and could not help but shake his head and laugh. Ever since Yufu arrived, those two had become quite a bit more lively. The atmosphere in the manor had become much more relaxed. She really was a blessing. While this was happening, Yufu was noisily running to the main room. Along the way, she saw many people hastily running around to prepare for the banquet, and she found that wormwood had already been hung. "Young Miss Yufu, we are preparing for the banquet up ahead. Lord Marquis is not here. How about we go and hang up some wormwood somewhere else?" Qi Ting followed along while gasping for air. Yufu thought for a while, then said, "Aunt Li said that this wormwood can be used to ward off evil. Where has there not been any hung up? I will go and hang some up for the general." Qi Ting thought quickly, then stood up, pointing toward a place that was not too far. "How about there? What sort of place is that?" Yufu was small and short and could not see where Qi Ting was pointing. Qi Ting smiled weirdly. "That's an outer study. Lord Marquis must be there. Let's go and hang up some wormwood there." The preparations for the banquet in the front half had already been completed, and the guests were beginning to arrive. Marquis Gu's manor very rarely hosted banquets that hosted officials from court. This time, they were hosting a banquet for a normal holiday like the Dragon Boat Festival. The main reason, however, was something that most could guess. It was likely that they would use this Dragon Boat Festival as an opportunity to introduce the young miss who had suddenly appeared. Naturally, nobody was willing to miss such a big event, and they all arrived a little early to try and gain some information. Lord Marquis, most of the guests have already arrived. Should we go and invite young Miss Yufu? Qian entered to report, and Gu Huaijiang was presently seated and looking over the list of guests coming today. There, he happened to see the name Yin Shuhua. Prime Minister Yin's son also came? That's right. The Yin family's eldest son and his father have different ways of handling things. Prime Minister Yin never treats Lord Marquis coldly nor warmly, but this eldest son is very amiable. He understands that he needs to get along well with the other officials in court. This is one area where he is better than Prime Minister Yin. As the head steward of the Marquis Manor, Qian had a good impression of Yin Shuhua. It could be seen just how good he was at winning over others. Gu Huaijiang mumbled to himself for a bit, but did not voice his own opinion. Go and invite young Miss Yufu over.
Yes.
Just as Qian set foot out of the door, he suddenly saw a servant hastily run over with a flustered look on their face. Lord Marquis, it's not good. Young Miss Yufu broke into your study and used a poison needle to hurt Qi Ting. What? Gu Huaijiang's brows slightly furrowed. Standing up from his seat, he immediately stepped out. Qian heard that Qi Ting had been hurt and became extremely nervous, thus he quickly followed along. Arriving at the outer study, they found Yufu with an arm forward to protect herself. She held many needles between her fingers, while she had a cautious look on her face. As for Qi Ting, she had fallen to the ground and was crying out in pain. Tinger, Tinger. Qian hastily ran over to support Qi Ting. They saw her reach up with one hand, and a couple of purple needle scratches could be seen. General. Yufu saw Gu Huaijiang and instantly lowered her guard before running over to his side. Qian saw that the situation was not good and feared that Yufu would stab Gu Huaijiang with the poison needles. However, he noticed that Gu Huaijiang did not seem to have any plan to dodge. As for Yufu's needles, they had disappeared at some point. Absolutely no harm had come to Gu Huaijiang. Yufu, what happened here? When Gu Huaijiang said this, Qi Ting, who was lying on the ground and crying, rushed to say, Lord Marquis, young Miss Yufu claimed to want to hang up some wormwood for you and insisted on coming into your study. This servant wanted to stop her, but she stabbed this servant with a needle. Qi Ting had been in the manor for a long time. When she said this, the servants serving outside the study believed her a little, and they became a little guarded against Yufu. They thought that she was a spy sent by Western Kuan. After all, the outer study was where Gu Huaijiang handled important military matters. Even the heir of the family, Gu Shubai, could not enter it casually, much less Yufu, who was an outside girl with no blood relations. Yufu covered her little mouth, and her fine brows slightly furrowed. She stubbornly looked at Gu Huaijiang. Head General, do you believe what she said? One was a large person, and one was a small person. One was straining her neck to look up, and one was looking down as much as possible. This method allowed them to handle the difference in height and meet eye to eye. After the two exchanged this glance, they both began to laugh. Yufu's giggling was even more melodious than the bells hanging from her head. Gu Huaijiang laughed while shaking his head. Qian and Qi Ting were both extremely shocked, staring at the two with their jaws dropped. This situation, was there something funny about it? Gu Huaijiang then turned around and looked at the others. When I was at the border, I had been plotted against by people from Western Kuan and ended up being poisoned. There was nobody who could cure it. It was Yufu who came out of Immortal's Valley and saved my life. Say, if she was a spy sent by Western Kuan, rather than not saving me back then, why bother with going through with this effort now? The people in Marquis Gu's manor knew that he had been injured at the border, but they did not know about the situation surrounding it. Upon hearing this now, they finally understood why Gu Huaijiang favored Yufu so much. Without Yufu, he would not have been able to return to Western Ling alive. Qian cast a look of doubt at Qi Ting, then looked at Yufu's innocent little face. For a while, he did not know who to trust. Laying on the ground, Qi Ting's heart sank upon hearing those words, as she thought to herself that this was not good. Gu Huaijiang continued, Did you know that Yufu was allowed to move freely in the military camp while I was recovering from my injury? All of the people in the Gu family's military treat her as a life-saving benefactor and don't put up the slightest bit of defense against her. Yet you? His gaze ended up falling on Qi Ting. Just what sort of look was this? He did not deliberately put on a murderous look. He was merely looking at her, yet his gaze was filled with swords pointed at her. Qi Ting suddenly forgot how to breathe and just looked at Gu Huaijiang's eyes in a daze. She felt as though her body no longer belonged to her. After this, it was as though she had entered a freezing cellar, and she began to shiver uncontrollably. With this sort of scenario, there was no need for Yu Fu to say anything. Everyone could see where the problem lay. If what Qi Ting had said was true, why would she feel so guilty that she would begin shaking? This marquis currently has no time to deal with you. Take her away for now. Yu Fu, I'll be bringing you to the front to see the guests. Gu Huaijiang said this, then grabbed Yu Fu's hand, slowly leading her past Qi Ting. Steward Qi, this is a medicine that will cure the poison. She'll be fine if she takes that. I don't want to prick her, but my clothes and hair were taken care of by Aunt Li and Sister Lianzhu. I can't make a mess of them and waste their efforts. Qian had already been feeling extremely ashamed from what Qi Ting had done, but now that he saw Yu Fu's kindness and heard her explanation, his eyes turned a little red. This old servant thanks young Miss Yu Fu. There's no need for young Miss to feel guilty. As a servant, Yao Hong actually framed young Miss and moved to grab young Miss. She only has herself to blame. He raised his head and saw the 2 black pills in the palm of Yu Fu's little white hand. He wanted to receive them, but he felt that he had no right to accept them. Yu Fu seemed to notice his embarrassment and squatted down to grab his hand. Without a care in the world, she placed the pills in his hand. She then followed Gu Huaijiang and noisily walked out. Gu Huaijiang walked along while laughing. It's no wonder you don't want to prick her. Aunt Li really did a good job with your clothes and makeup today. You are really beautiful. Really? Yu Fu blinked her large eyes and lifted the pouch hanging at her hip to carefully examine it. Gu Huaijiang saw the pouch and noticed that it was not the one that he had sent, and this aroused his curiosity. Who made this pouch for you? He could tell that Yu Fu really liked this light purple pouch. The swaying reed pattern had a lively feeling that was similar to what Yu Fu gave off. It was eldest brother. There was a faint hint of a smile in Gu Huaijiang's eyes as he silently nodded. All of the guests had arrived. In truth, it was mostly female guests who had gathered around the two, making it hard for them to get through. Today, Princess Danyang had also come out of the palace, and she spent all of her time cozied up to Gu Shubai, giving him an extreme headache. Helpless, he could only shoot a glance at Gu Hanamo, but the latter simply sat in place with a blank expression. He was not paying much attention to anyone. He understood Gu Shubai's expression, but he was unwilling to deal with guests on his behalf. He could only pass along this look to the nearby Gu Wenqing. Gu Wenqing was currently holding a cup of wine and appeared to be happily chatting with someone who looked like a son from a noble family. Seeing this, he helplessly sighed and had no choice but to go and take care of these officials from court. Fortunately, Gu Huaijiang arrived with Yu Fu just a short while later. Upon seeing Gu Huaijiang personally lead a young girl out, everyone opened their eyes wide in disbelief. They felt as though they were looking at an illusion. The dignified head general of Western Ling, Gu Huaijiang, was the marquis with only one person above him, but tens of thousands of people below him. He was decisive and fought in all directions. It was not an exaggeration to say that he held off Western Kuan's ambitions for Eastern Ling on his own. Just the mere mention of his magnificence was enough to make enemies tremble. Yet this general was carefully holding a little girl's hand? This truly was too hard to believe. Everyone then turned their attention to Yu Fu at his side, and this made them feel even more shocked. This little girl's skin was as white as snow, and she was currently looking at everyone with a smile. She looked to be no more than 10 years of age. Her large eyes were black yet brilliant. When she smiled, her dimples were as sweet as honey. This truly was a beauty. When she grew up, she would surely be even more beautiful than Marquis Gu's late wife. To be able to give birth to such a beautiful daughter, her birth mother must have been a great beauty. It was no wonder the virtuous Marquis Gu would. As for the clothes that she wore, it is a set of pink, cloud-patterned clothes. They were a magnificent rosy color that made her position in the marquis manner even more apparent. If she was not Gu Huaijiang's beloved daughter, how could she be able to wear this set of cloud-patterned clothes? Even someone as noble as Princess Danyang was not able to wear them. Is this young Miss Yufu? She really is obedient and bright. She really looks like Lord Marquis. She really is worthy of being Lord Marquis' daughter. She is really beautiful. Everyone's praises continued without end. As long as they could curry favor with Gu Huaijiang, they were willing to say all manners of things that they would usually be unwilling to say. Who told this great general and marquis to have more power than all of these officials, yet also act as if he was uninvolved in the affairs of this world. To curry favor with him was truly too difficult. Yufu listened to the praise and subconsciously wanted to explain her relationship to Gu Huaijiang, but she felt the hand holding hers suddenly tightly a little. She looked up at Gu Huaijiang, and the latter slightly shook his head. With this, Yufu lowered her head and slightly bit her lip. When it came time to say something, a girl in court clothes suddenly came over. Uncle Gu, this is younger sister Yufu, right? A shadow bore down, and Yufu raised her head to look over at who had just come. There, she saw a bright red dress that reached down to the ground, and it was embroidered with a golden thread. Looking up even further, she was of average height, and her waistline seemed to be quite full. Her figure was very curvaceous. Her face was a perfect oval, and her skin was beautiful. Her cheeks were plump, and she was looking at her with a kind smile. What a dignified and noble beauty! Gu Huaijiang smiled while holding Yufu's hand. This is the fifth daughter of His Majesty and the first Empress, Princess Danyang. Greetings, Princess Danyang. Yufu gently curtsied and was about to perform a blessing of fortune, but her hands had already been caught by Princess Danyang. She carefully examined Yufu's appearance. The more she looked, the more stunned she became. In the end, she was in a complete daze. Even rarer still, she had just been brought back to the capital by Gu Huaijiang. But she never made a fool of herself despite having met so many nobles and officials. With this bearing, it really was no loss that she was Marquis Gu's daughter, nor was it a loss that she looked at the pink clothes made of cloud-embroidered brocade that Yufu wore. Before coming, she had complained to her palace maids that Gu Shubai had never given her such a valuable gift. However, he had given so many to an illegitimate daughter all at once. Now that she saw Yufu's pristine appearance, what little jealousy that existed in her heart was instantly extinguished. There's no need to be so distant in how you call me. You're Uncle Gu's daughter. It's fine to just call me Sister Danyang. While Princess Danyang said this, she turned and gave a look to the palace servant accompanying her. When that palace servant saw that her attitude towards Yufu was so genial, she quickly came to an understanding. She turned around and retrieved a little box made of sandalwood and decorated with gold thread. With this being our first meeting, this is a tourmaline bracelet that my Empress mother gave me during my childhood. Now that I've grown up, it no longer fits me. Giving them to you, they will likely fit you well. The palace servant opened up the wooden box, and a fiery red appeared. The brilliant and colorful bracelet lay inside. Princess Danyang personally retrieved it and put it on Yufu's left wrist. Quite honestly, the fit really was quite nice. Sister Yufu's skin is very white, thus wearing red suits you perfectly. How about keeping it on? Princess Danyang looked at her with eyes filled with expectation. The warmth and kindness also showed a desire to get on her good side. She was being even kinder than to her own younger sister. Yufu did not know the exact details and did not dare accept it so casually, thus she raised her head and looked up at Gu Huaijiang. He immediately recognized that this bracelet was something that had genuinely been made in the palace, and Princess Danyang's gift had been given with a great deal of sincerity. He then nodded. Princess gave it to you. You should accept it. Seeing his calm expression, Yufu finally understood what sort of standing Marquis Gu's manner had in the country. The Empress' firstborn princess called him uncle, and this valuable bracelet was given to a young and illegitimate daughter like her. She had even spoken in such a tone to try and gain her favor for fear that she would not accept it. For a general to reach the same level as Gu Huaijiang, it was absolutely unprecedented, and it would never be replicated. It was no wonder the people of Western Kuan would try to assassinate him with poison. Thank you, Sister Danyang. Yufu happily accepted, then bowed in a salute. Her little body performed this unfamiliar action and appeared a little jerky, but it was unreasonably cute. She tentatively reached out in hopes of feeling Yu Fu's little cheeks. She wanted to see what exactly her tender and white skin would feel like. Before that hand could reach Yu Fu, many other noble daughters began to run up from behind her. "Young Miss Yu Fu, this is my greeting gift to you. Take a look. Do you like it?" The young girls had beautiful smiles, and they surrounded Yu Fu to rush to give her gifts to try and curry favor with her. Gu Huaijiang had even been pushed to the side. He looked at Yu Fu with a bit of concern, and Yu Fu gave him a reassuring look. She even cleverly winked at him. Gu Huaijiang then returned to his own spot and looked at his 6 sons. There, he found that they were also observing the situation around Yu Fu. This was her first time being surrounded by daughters from noble households in the capital, and nobody knew if she would be able to grow accustomed to it. It just so happened that Marquis Gu's Manos only had sons, and nobody could be with Yu Fu and mingling with that group. This made everyone feel a little uneasy. Not long later, they found that their concern had been unnecessary. "Young Miss Yu Fu, the clothes that you're wearing are really beautiful. This is the brocade that the eldest young master brought back from Jinling, right?" Within a few moments, everyone's attention had become focused on her clothes. Yu Fu gently smiled, her dimples blossoming. "Sister, there's no need to be so courteous. It's fine to just call me Yu Fu. This is indeed the cloud-patterned brocade given to me by eldest brother, but I think that the linen silk that sister is wearing is also quite pretty." The girl who had been praised was Lu Rui. She was the daughter of Lu Zhan, who was an official in the Ministry of Civil Personnel. It happened that she usually liked to wear linen silk. She heard this and could not help but lower her head and look down at her clothes, as a look of surprise filled her eyes. "Sister Yu Fu, how did you know that I'm currently wearing clothes made of linen silk? Was it not said that this was the general's illegitimate daughter who had just been brought back from some remote area? How could she recognize such a valuable material?" Yu Fu's smile did not change. Linen silk is a famously soft fabric. Not only do people in Eastern Ling know about it, but even I had heard about it in the Immortals Valley. This fabric is most suited to being worn during spring and summer. It's hard to obtain, refreshing, and does not hurt the skin. Lu Rui nodded her head repeatedly. Right. That remote area was called Immortals Valley. Princess Danyang said in shock. Immortals Valley? The Immortals Valley that is deity of medicine Sun Qi's territory? The Immortals Valley that is between Eastern Ling, Western Kuin, and Northern Li? Yu Fu's smile turned her eyes into the shape of crescent moons. As she looked up at her, "That's right. That is the place." Princess Danyang looked pensive. Marquis Gu had actually hidden his illegitimate daughter in that sort of a secretive place. It was no wonder nobody found out about it after so many years. It really was extremely cunning. Immortals Valley is not a place that normal people can enter as they wish. When I was young, I heard Father Emperor say that when Imperial Grandmother fell severely ill and nearly passed away, it was fortunate that the deity of medicine Sun Qi came and saved her. Later on, Imperial Grandmother lived until the age of 80 before passing away, her body free of illness. Unfortunately, Princess Danyang suddenly became a little crestfallen. Unfortunately, deity of medicine Sun Qi has not come out for over a decade. When Mother Empress fell ill, Father Emperor was unable to invite him in. Thus Mother Empress passed away. Hearing her sound so hurt, Yu Fu was reluctant to say that she was actually a disciple of the deity of medicine. She just gently held her hand. "Sister Danyang, don't be sad. Her Highness the Empress is definitely watching you from above and protecting you." Having been comforted by a child much younger than herself in front of so many people, Princess Danyang wiped her face with a bit of embarrassment. It's fine. Let me see the little bells on your head. Who put them on for you? They're really pretty." You're tuning in to the Romance Rendezvous YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.